We'd like to welcome everybody to the Northeastern Region RAC. This meeting is being held in person at the UNA Conference Center, and it is also being streamed live on YouTube. This is a public forum, allows you to express your opinions, proposals on wildlife management in our state. This board considers your ideas and opinions, feedback before making decisions on proposals before us today. The RAC is charged with setting wildlife policies for our state. Wildlife management is complex, sometimes emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinion about what's best for Utah's wildlife. That's why we're here today, and that's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. The yellow comment cards are out there in the hall, and then give them to, do you want to give them to?
Come up.
You can bring them right up here, your comment cards, and we'll take them. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that do not align with their own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where board members can listen, digest, address the concerns and ideas and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, or laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, gender. If this behavior occurs, the RAC chair will help remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, applicable individuals be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. And if you need to take a call, we ask that you step outside. We'd like to introduce the RAC members here. We'll start at the end down there with Natasha. Go ahead.
I'm Natasha Haddon, and I represent the U.S. Forest Service.
Mark China with non-consumptive user.
Jake Huber, sportsman.
Eric Major, public at large.
I'm Grizzle represent Sportsmen.
I'm Renee RC, representing the Bureau of Land Management.
Dwayne Davies representing Ag.
Nathan Crapo, public at large. Richard Bueller, public at large.
We'd also like to note that Gary Nelson and Ken Johnson are both online there. They're wildlife board members. We'd also like to welcome the DWR employees, those presenting, Dax Mangus, Ken Hersey, Rusty Robinson, Lindy Vardy, and Chad Wilson. The next item on the agenda will be to approve the agenda and minutes. Do I have a motion to accept it?
I make a motion to approve the agenda and minutes from the last meeting.
Natasha makes a motion to accept the agenda and minutes.
I'll second.
And it's seconded by Jake Huber. All those in favor, raise your hands. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is Wildlife Board meeting update. The last meeting was on September 19th. There was a motion to ask the division to study the possibilities for increased opportunities for spearfishing and to look at the impacts of spearfishing on Utah. Was placed in the action log and it passed unanimously. The next proposal was to accept the division's proposal for the ice hole size at Flaming Gorge, but they asked the division to monitor the use of hole size and report back in 1 year. This passed 3-2. The next was a motion to accept the proposal on Manning, Meadows, and Bonnie reservoirs and to reevaluate in 2 years. This passed unanimously. Another motion was to accept the balance of the division's recommendations for the fishing regs, and this passed unanimously. The next motion was on R657-61 evaluation of the real property interest. The motion to approve the amendments as presented, and it was passed unanimously. The next was a motion to accept the conservation permit audit as presented. It passed 4 in favor, 1 recusal. Next was the conservation permit annual report, and it was a motion to accept as presented. There were 4 in favor, 1 recusal. Next was to accept the expo permit as report as presented. It passed with 4 in favor and 1 recusal. Next was the expo permit allocation, and it passed in 4 in favor, 1 recusal. The next motion was the LOA committee membership motion to approve Eric Luke as the RAC representative on the LOA committee, and that passed unanimously. The next was to approve the 2025 RAC and board meeting dates, and that passed unanimously. The next item is regional update, and I'll turn it over to Miles.
Good evening, everyone. Miles Hammer, I'm the regional supervisor here for the Northeast region for the Division of Wildlife. So got a slideshow we'll go through for a minute and let people know what's going on. So anyhow, we'll go to the next slide. So in our outreach section, wildlife events, we've had a busy fall. Really, it's busy most all year, but on September 28th, we had the annual youth pheasant hunt over at Pleasant Valley Hunting Preserve. We had a lot of attendees throughout the state actually come and participate in the youth pheasant hunt. So didn't hear of any dogs or people shot, so I think it was a success overall. So anyhow, it's always fun to get kids out and get them into some pheasants. So we're continuing the pheasant releases for another couple of weeks here in the region. Dedicated hunters have really taken a lot of that work for us. They go down to the grower and pick the birds up and haul them back up here for us. And oftentimes dedicated hunters also help distribute the birds here in the local area. So that's a big help for us to get that workload done and provide some good experiences for the public. Upcoming, there'll be the annual Christmas bird count at Ouray National Refuge on December 14th. There should be some more information to come on that, but if anybody's interested in participating with that, Tanya Kiefer or Tanya Selby would be a good contact for that. She'll organize that event. So those are good things coming up. Our aquatic section has been really, really busy this year, and they're just barely finishing up their field season. Just recently, in the last week, completed it's called the IABAT surveys on the Strawberry River. These are surveys that are rotated on some of the streams that have been impacted by the Central Utah project. And so it's monitoring fish populations in those streams and how they're doing. So fish populations are doing really well throughout the Strawberry River, including up in the burn scar of the Dollar Ridge fire. For a couple of years, that fishery was pretty much gone after some of the huge sedimentation events and things came down there. But fish seem to be doing pretty well in there overall. There seems to be a couple of age classes maybe missing, probably from like a flash flood event that may have smothered out the eggs for that year. But overall, it's looking pretty dang good. So that's something we're happy to report. The next slide shows some of the fish that were sampled up there. You go to the next one. There we go. Cutthroat are doing good in that stretch of the Strawberry River, and then of course brown trout and some pretty large brown trout, well over 20 inches, were discovered throughout the Strawberry River. So, anyhow, it's exciting to see the Strawberry River back and providing some good fishing again. Just some more pictures of just nice, beautiful brown trout that our people were able to handle that just recently. In addition, they just recently completed the fall walleye index netting at Starvation Reservoir. It's just an annual event that we do in the fall to monitor how walleye populations are doing in the reservoir. We've had an abundance of walleye and have encouraged anglers to harvest those just because walleye have a tendency to eat themselves out of house and home, so to speak. But good news is yellow perch numbers are looking a lot better this year. We've had several years that predation from walleye have kept those numbers down, but they're looking good. So it should be a good opportunity for some anglers to maybe get out on the ice this year and catch yellow perch. Some large walleye were discovered on the surveys, so we've got good healthy population of them. There's definitely some big large walleye in Starvation. And then in this picture is just a picture of smallmouth bass. Smallmouth bass are doing really well in starvation as well. Just a quick update on Flaming Gorge. We just barely wrapped up kokanee spawning operations on November 1st up at Sheep Creek. It was an average year for Sheep Creek spawning, so that's good. Last year was a hard year for spawning, so we're excited that numbers are looking a little bit better this year. But unfortunately, we've only collected about 70% of the statewide quota of kokanee eggs this year. And so we're looking at other states to try to find some additional eggs. I think there may be a lead on some from Montana, but unfortunately, all the Western states are kind of dealing with a similar issue with kokanee salmon and having a hard time getting enough eggs for their spawning operations. They just completed the burbot trammel netting up at Flaming Gorge earlier this month as well. Looked like the burbot numbers were up a little bit in the inflow area, but overall, they're still trending down in the reservoir. Crayfish numbers look really good. They had lots and lots of crayfish in the nets this year, and burbot have really impacted them in the past. So that's a good sign when you see large numbers of crayfish. And so they feed a lot of other species, including smallmouth and things as well. So anyhow, we'll still have to look through the numbers and kind of determine what all that means. But it's so far it's looking a little better this year at Flaming Gorge overall. The new regulations for Flaming Gorge will take effect January 1st. That includes the unlimited catch on small lake trout, and so anglers will be able to take advantage of that starting January 1st. But the Wyoming regulations are already in effect. So on the Wyoming side of the reservoir, that's already in effect right now. Habitat, just wanted to talk a little bit about the Yellow Lake fire. I think many of you have probably heard that being talked about over the last month. It was burning pretty rapidly for a couple of weeks there. It is now 100% contained, and it burned a total area of 33,173 acres. So it's a pretty sizable footprint, kind of up the Wolf Creek Summit area and over towards Lightning Ridge and in that area. The good news is the soil burn severity analysis showed that most of the fire was kind of in a low to a moderate burn severity on the soil, which means that should respond very, very well on its own. In the next year, we should have a really good response from native plant species in there. So we're excited about that. We're not anticipating many impacts to the fisheries on this one because of the mosaic that it burned, and we didn't really get much fire into the West Fork of the Duchesne, where we do have cutthroat trout, and the fire burned in a pretty mosaic light pattern in the North Fork of the Duchesne drainage. So we just don't anticipate a lot of debris flows or sedimentation coming in there. So we're excited that we don't expect a lot of fisheries impacts, but we really expect some great benefits to big game. Certainly we respect people's private property and human safety, but sometimes these fires get a lot of the terrestrial wildlife biologists excited. The response from deer and elk usually is really well in these fires. So it's kind of a silver lining, certainly with fires like this, that we should see some great benefits to big game. This is kind of a map of the fire, and it shows you that soil burn severity. The yellow is the moderate. That's probably in some of the conifer pockets that were maybe a little bit more fuel, but in general, the fire burned fast enough through those areas that it just didn't do much to the soil. So really very little high burn severity in the fire. So should be a good thing. Our habitat folks are also just doing a lot of other planned projects. We recently completed some bullhog work over at Tabby Mountain WMA near the Golden Stairs area. It's 400 acres. I've been seeding some fuel breaks along Highway 40 between Jensen and Colorado, and just doing a number of other projects. This picture just shows a chain harrow project down in Meadow Creek in the Book Cliffs, where we're just trying to clear out some really big and tall sagebrush and try to allow for some more grasses and things to grow in there. So watershed.utah.gov is a website that anybody can go and take a look at, learn more about the watershed restoration initiative, but also learn about a lot of the projects that are going on out there. There's really too many to list here without spending a ton of time. Wildlife folks, just wanted to remind everybody that harvest reporting is now mandatory. I think you have 30 days after the close of your hunt to report your harvest, whether you harvest or not. So just a reminder to hunters to do that. We're going to be starting our postseason deer classification right away. And so I think we've actually maybe even started that a little bit, but any of the RAC members are welcome to participate and go out with some of our biologists. So definitely hit up Dallin or any of the biologists here tonight. And if you want to go out and spend some time with them, be a good opportunity to see what the data we collect and what's going on out in the field. Our capture season's already upon us. I think this year we're planning on about 1,700 animals statewide. We'll definitely be catching some here in the Northeast region, and next week starting up catching deer and moving into the South Slope as well. And then later on into December, we'll be catching pronghorn and more deer out in the Book Cliffs and Anthro area. So again, if any folks want to attend those, definitely let us know. Those schedules kind of are pending weather and certainly aircraft as well. So it's hard to really pin down the exact days until we get really quite close to those. We're also going to be revising the Book Cliff bison plan starting this month. So we'll be putting together a committee to go through that. And then lastly, just completing some boreal owl surveys on the UNAs. It's just a species we don't know much about, and we've actually been finding quite a few boreal owls. So that's interesting. Law enforcement is always busy this time of year, but they spend a lot of time with security work on the Yellow Lake fire. Luckily, a lot of that was before most of our general season hunts, but anyhow, they spent quite a bit of time there, but have definitely moved into the hunting season full swings as it progressed. Our K-9 officer still gets used heavily by not only for our use, but we get a lot of requests from the sheriff department or the other police departments to help with things. And this fall helped locate a runaway juvenile in Roosevelt with that. So that those dogs are really pretty amazing. If you guys haven't seen them in action, they've done some demonstrations around. If you ever get a chance, you should look at it. That's some other good cases where officers have witnessed elk being poached and left, as well as elk being shot in a limited entry area with general season tags, as well as even some high grading cases in addition. So lots of those kind of things going on, and our officers have made some good cases so far this year. So anyhow, there's lots and lots of things that could be discussed there, but I think we'll leave it at that in the interest of time getting through the agenda. And I guess the last thing I want to maybe mention is Director Jay Shirley's here with us tonight. Jay is going to be retiring at the end of the year, so just wanted to acknowledge him tonight and just really appreciate his leadership and his passion for wildlife over the last 3 years, at least as a director and over his career. So anyhow, Jay's, I think, leaving the agency in a really good place, and we'll certainly miss him in his leadership role. So anyhow, that's it for me.
Well, I think we will, I forgot to mention, welcome the public here tonight. Don't forget to fill out a yellow comment card for this. You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and if you're with an organization, you'll get 5 minutes. So we'll turn the time over to, we'll jump into number 5. We'll turn the time over to Dax Mangus on the big game or the statewide mule deer plan.
Okay, how are we doing? Got audio? I talk loud, so thanks, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here tonight, talk about the mule deer plan. I guess just real quick before we jump in, there was one typo in the plan that got sent out to you. We talked a lot about buck to doe ratios in the statewide plan, and at one point in our committee discussions, we had talked about changing the buck to doe ratio on our premium limited entry units down to 35 to 40. And then later we revised that and decided on recommending that buck to doe ratio objective be 40 to 45. And I had updated it to 35 to 40 in the plan and then didn't go back and correct it. It was correct in the presentation and in the memo, but in the plan, just to be clear, the recommendation is 40 to 45 for the buck to doe ratio objective for our premium limited entry units. And just to kind of clarify, this is a little tricky as this plan revision kind of triggers several different of the recommendations that are on the agenda tonight. So we'll start with the deer plan. In the deer plan is where we talk about the habitat strategies, the strategies for managing habitat, water development, predator management. We also talk about buck to doe ratios and how we hunt bucks. And then the next presentation by Dr. Hersey will be more focused on the research strategies, which aren't specifically in the plan. So if you're really passionate and want to talk about the restricted weapons hunts or the antler point restriction recommendation, that will be the next agenda item. And then we go to season dates that also includes, things from the deer plan and the research proposals. So they kind of all build on each other, and as well as the proposals about youth hunt allocations. So, we'll do our best to navigate that. And, some of these discussions, we don't want to stifle a discussion, but we might postpone it till we get to the agenda item that's more focused on that. And if we need to go a little back and forth or have another division employee come up to help answer some questions during a different agenda item, we're happy to do that. And, with that, let's jump in, and if there's any questions or clarifications, whatever we can do to facilitate a good discussion, happy to see everyone here tonight. So let's go for it. So thank you.
With that, we'll open up any questions from RAC members.
Hey, Dax. On the extended archery only permits, have you guys, is those going to be like an unlimited number, or are you guys planning on setting a number of tags, or?
Yeah, we talked about that in the committee about the possibility of making them unlimited. Folks weren't totally comfortable with that. So we're going to recommend a quota on those this spring. I think we're going to recommend a generous quota, in the neighborhood somewhere probably around 3,000 permits. It's the extended archery hunt, if you've hunted it, it's kind of self-limiting in a lot of ways where, in this region, a lot of our extended archery areas are almost exclusively private lands. The places where we do have a lot of public land that's in the extended archery, it's this steep and covered in snow. So it's kind of a self-limiting hunt from that standpoint, but the committee wasn't, and the division, but we're still going to recommend a quota on that. We weren't quite comfortable enough to go unlimited.
Okay, and then that'll still take preference points if someone chooses that.
If you're hunting bucks, you're using your preference points.
I know there's a lot of talk, and I've heard the other ones talk about lowering the buck to doe ratio can potentially increase deer herds. Is there any, I guess if you have more deer, then you have more bucks. If you grow your population, I guess that's the theme of it, but you have to grow it a certain amount to get back to where you were, the number of bucks where you were. If it's just looking at that variable. So is there any idea of is it going to increase 25%, 10%, 5%? Because that's looking at some of these numbers, if it's just 5%, then you technically might not have as many bucks as you had before.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, there was a study done, an experimental study where they lowered the buck-to-doe ratio in Colorado. They looked at that, and for every buck that they lowered their buck-to-doe ratio, their fawn-to-doe ratio went up by 1.7 fawns. We looked at, our data set that we looked at in Utah, where we haven't gone in and actually experimentally lowered buck-to-doe ratios, but we just plotted up everything we've seen and looked at the growth rate. If you look at that growth rate, so a lambda of 1 means your population is stable. A lambda above 1 means it's growing. Below 1 means it's shrinking. I got asked this question in, I think it was Southern Region RAC. And so we went down and crunched the numbers a little bit and we're looking at it. If you had based on that data set under average conditions, if your buck-to-doe ratio is 25 bucks per 100 does, you would have a lambda of 0.95. So below 1, meaning that your population is declining about 5% annually. If you had a buck-to-doe ratio of 15, your lambda is 1.03. So you're looking at 3% annual growth. And I think one of the key takeaways from this too is it might not be a giant number immediately, but in the deer world, 3% every year, compounding over years, can really add up. It's kind of like your 401k or something, but and a lot of times the difference between a deer herd that's thriving and a deer herd that's stagnant or declining can be a difference in adult doe survival at 86% versus 83%. So I don't want to oversell it. It's not like by lowering the buck-to-doe ratio by 2 or 3 bucks per 100 does is going to overnight turn it around and we're going to double the deer population in 2 or 3 years. But because there aren't a lot of silver bullets in how you manage deer, we want to try to use everything we can, throw everything we have at it. I mean, we've been doing the habitat work for years now, major habitat work. We're stepping things up when it comes to predator management in situations where we need to do more predator management. And if we have compelling data sets that tell us this can help as well, we want to try to implement that at a level that's acceptable to the public, in addition to help with disease resilience and providing opportunity to let people get out and hunt deer. So it's kind of a lot of things mixed together. I don't want to oversell anything. I don't think it's a silver bullet that's going to solve all of our problems overnight. Thank you.
Dax, I got a question for you. So,
Can you speak into the mic?
excuse me, Dax, you're basing all this off in Colorado. We're not Colorado, we're Utah.
Yeah.
And Colorado is, I don't know what percentage, but a big percentage is private property. And I think we need to do our own study. Like you said, you went to the southern unit, but the buck-doe ratio here is not where it should be, in my opinion.
Oh, that's great. If I guess I want to clarify. This is based on a data set from Utah, a huge data set from Utah. I mentioned the Colorado study too, because that was one where they actually lowered the buck-to-doe ratio to see what it would do, what changes it would make, and it made those changes. In Utah, we're just looking at it. We've observed this over a 12-year period all across the state. We're talking thousands of data points, looking at buck-to-doe ratios, fawn-to-doe ratios. And then for the last 8 or 9 years, we've been looking at fat levels in does. And on units with lower buck-to-doe ratios, we have fatter does, which leads to higher survival and higher productivity. So we have looked at it in Utah. It looks like it's consistent with what they observed in Colorado. And I'm glad you bring up buck-to-doe ratios. I mean, let's talk about that tonight. If folks feel like the buck-to-doe ratios aren't where they want them to be, that's something we're setting in the statewide plan, and let's have some discussions there and get some input on that. If folks want to see them differently, than what we're proposing, let's talk about it. There's trade-offs. There's pros and cons to manage them at a higher level. One of those trade-offs might be lower productivity.
Is there any concern? Are you guys concerned with our premium limited entry units where we have these really high buck-to-doe ratios? Is that trend? Are we seeing a lower herd growth in those units currently?
Yes.
Is that a concern for you guys at this point?
We have a different goal on our limited entry and premium limited entry units. On our general season units, we're trying to optimize the ability for folks to go out and hunt hunt deer. We want general season, just the definition, the idea of general season is that folks can hunt it on a regular basis. And we fully recognize it probably means you're going to have lower success rates. You're probably going to see fewer bucks and smaller bucks, younger bucks. You know, we completely recognize and appreciate that. On a limited entry unit or a premium limited entry unit, you're going to see much higher success rates. There's going to be fewer hunters afield. You know, hunters are going to be a lot more likely to shoot an older age class buck, a bigger buck. It's a trade-off. So, you know, there's a reason why most of the state is in the general season category, because in that category, we can optimize for productivity, for hunter opportunity. The way we're managing our limited entry and premium limited entry units, we probably don't expect to see those herds really grow a whole bunch unless we have really good conditions. We have really good conditions, that will override. You know, if you have great conditions, you can grow deer, you know, kind of despite or regardless of whatever your buck to doe ratio might be. In average years, or especially in poor years, I think that's where we're going to see it more. So we're not necessarily managing for maximum productivity and trying to optimize hunting opportunity on limited entry and premium limited entry units. When we're managing bucks, it's really evaluating trade-offs and deciding what we want to do. And we try to create a diversity of hunting opportunity types.
How low did you say that Colorado study dropped their buck to doe ratio?
It was by about 10 bucks per 100 does.
And I think it was in the presentation they said it could go down as low as 8 was the kind of the bottom. Just, I was thinking that's what it said in there.
So like talking about kind of like biological thresholds with buck to doe ratios, you'd probably be into the mid single digits before we would expect to see any kind of a, you know, does not getting bred or not getting bred during a relatively, you know, synchronous time period or about the same time period. So we've had in the past in Utah, we've had buck to doe ratios been in that mid single digit range and still seen high pregnancy rates and still seen fawning periods, you know, happening in a fairly concise period of time.
I think you commented in one of the other racks that during the 80s that when we had higher, it was in that 8 to whatever ratio back in the 80s, 90s type time frame, I think is what if I recall right.
Yeah, I think someone else who said that in the meeting, but it's accurate.
Can you elaborate more on the 30% the 30% changes that to exceed for the year permit number? Can you kind of elaborate on that just a little bit by being able to change that, have thrown that in there in this as well?
Yeah. So in the deer plan, you know, we set a postseason buck to doe ratio, you know, a target that we're trying to manage for. I think 2 iterations of the plan, previous iterations of the plan, like 2 plans ago, we based that management almost entirely on looking at the 3-year average of buck to doe ratio collected, you know, the 3 years prior to when we make permit recommendations in the spring. During this last plan period, we've got such great data from the deer survival study. We probably have more data available to us than we do have more data available to us than we've ever had before. We started to incorporate using more of that data rather than making reactive recommendations based on what was observed in previous years. We're making more proactive recommendations based on the data that we have in hand and what we anticipate seeing, you know, this next year or two. So for the last several years, we've made our permit recommendations in the spring based on factoring all that data into the recommendation, not just the buck to doe ratio for the previous 3 years. We still look at that, but we're paying even more attention to what was the buck to doe ratio last year, what's our population estimate, what are our survival rates, what are our fawn to doe ratios, so what's production, what's fawn survival, what is that going to look like next year, what kind of condition were our deer in when we captured deer and collared deer, you know, right now in December, you know, November, December. What kind of winter are we having? Did we have a 2022, 2023 type winter, or did we have a 2023, 2024 type winter? So we're factoring all that in to it when we make our recommendations in the spring. And for the most part, when those recommendations that we've made based on all that data have been accepted, we've come in right where we need to be for our buck to doe ratios. And even though we have a target buck-to-doe ratio that everyone has gone through the public process, been approved by the Wildlife Board. Every spring we come back and make a recommendation to try to manage to that ratio. And we hit some hiccups sometimes where folks have kind of their favorite unit where they want to be more conservative. They're not as willing to maybe increase permits. They want to wait longer, whatever it might be. And then the further we get out of compliance with the target that we're aiming for, the harder it is to bring it back. The expectations of hunters change. It makes it really tricky. And so what we're recommending doing is setting some sideboards plus or minus 30%. And based on all that data that we're using now to make the recommendations, if the change would be within that 30% plus or minus, we would just make it every year. If it was beyond that, we'd bring it through the public process and get the public input and have the RACs and then the Wildlife Board make that decision. It's similar to what we did with turkeys. I don't know if you remember a few years back, we used to bring turkey permits through every year. And then we changed the statewide plan for turkeys where it just looks at some certain data points and metrics, and then the permits are just adjusted automatically based on that. It's the same type of concept as what we're recommending here. If it's an extreme change, really big swings, we'll bring it out, run it past the public. If it's within that 30%, those sideboards, so it's a smaller change, we're just saying, let's have the argument about the buck-to-doe ratios now as we set the plan, and then let us just manage to the plan.
On that, so looking at the past few years, have you looked, would those numbers even been brought out to the RACs, or would they have just been approved? Would they have just gone in because they've been within that?
Most of the recommendations have been within that range. Where we've seen the biggest changes or the biggest recommended changes have been, it's kind of a compounding problem, have been mostly southern region units. And the reason we're bringing bigger recommended changes annually is because they didn't make the changes the year before, and the reason now those changes were big is because they didn't make the changes the year before that. So it's kind of a compounding problem. A high percentage of the recommendations would probably fall within that 30% window. But that's what's being approved in almost every region.
Do you have a number of maybe like what's the highest percentage you've proposed?
I think it was 2-3 years ago, we recommended cutting permits on the Pine Valley unit by over 2,000 permits. They went from 4,500 down to I think closer to 2,000. I don't have the exact number in my head, but it's in that ballpark. And that was after 4 years in a row of really severe drought, and we just saw production dried up completely. And the division made that recommendation. That one was, when it's big cuts, they seem to be accepted. That one was accepted, and we made big cuts on that unit. And the buck-to-doe ratio on that unit objective is 18 to 20. And we cut 2,500 permits, somewhere in that ballpark. The next year when they went out and classified over 2,000 deer, and it came in at 19. So we've had pretty good success of hitting our targets when we factor in all those pieces of data we have. We have better data than we've ever had before, but we want to use it to use it in management, not just collect data and say, gee whiz. We want to collect the data and then use it in management.
Any other RAC questions?
I just got a question, not to get off the buck-to-doe ratios, but I know part of this plan is predator management as well. Can you kind of speak to maybe how, the opening, season on mountain lions or different things, how you've seen that affect or where we're at on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting looking at the data for cougar harvest. We actually haven't harvested more cougars since that change in state law. We have seen a shift where harvesting similar numbers of cougars, but we're seeing more cougars being harvested by folks incidentally that are cruising down the road like Eric and see one and harvest it, and more cougars being harvested by trappers. And one of the things that we've identified, we recently revised our predator management policy. Even though cougar hunting has really been liberalized by the legislature, we still see on some units when we have cougar predation on adult does that it approaches that 7% and higher threshold, that appears to be a biological threshold that it becomes a top-down limiting effect on those populations. And in some of those areas, we would work with our sister agency, Utah Department of Ag and Food, to try to get some additional cougar harvest on those units if our data indicates that cougar predation would be a limiting factor there. I was asked about this last night as well, and there'll be a presentation coming out the next round of RACs next month. And Devery, our new staff biologist in Salt Lake office, will be bringing it out. But we're going to propose an increase to the coyote bounty program for coyotes harvested within crucial mule deer habitats. So those are a couple of the predator management changes that we're implementing as a result of discussions that went through this committee, and you'll be seeing that cougar recommendation, or sorry, the coyote recommendation next RAC cycle.
Any other RAC questions before we move to public questions?
Yeah, one more. So there's some CWD discussion in this. Has lowering the mature deer numbers led to any progress with CWD in other places, specifically Colorado? They've been on a warpath for their older age class bucks for the past 5 to 10 years. Has there been any studies done on if that's improved that at all?
Yeah, so I talked with our wildlife veterinarian that works with us, Dr. Virginia Stout, and she's on the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Wildlife Health Committee. Dr. Stout's really engaged in CWD issues and research. And, Colorado, as you're referring to, they changed their season structure. Their last cycle, they went to a much later season structure, and they lowered their buck-to-doe ratios on some units. And over that period of time, they collected CWD information, looking at prevalences, and it was kind of all over the board. Some units went down, some units went up. I don't know if they've published like a final result from that yet or not, but it seems like it's kind of a mixed bag. The overall trend and based on lots of big data sets analyzed from lots of states would suggest that, lower buck-to-doe ratios, fewer older age class bucks in the population would reduce spread and prevalence of CWD. Whether or not we're able to implement that on a scale that makes a readily measurable difference, I think is maybe still to be seen. I talked with our veterinarian, and she said it might take as long as 15 years to really start to see more of a difference. So good question. I think there's a lot more questions than there are answers when it comes to CWD.
Any more questions from the RAC before we move to the public questions? Okay, we'll take any public questions. I don't think it's on.
Seemed like it was. Now it is. There we go.
There we got you.
Tyrell, hey, Biglin. Dax, correct me if I'm wrong, but 5 years ago when we started our new plan, didn't we lower objectives in a lot of units as well as lower the ratios?
I don't think we did.
I'm pretty sure we did on quite a few of the units. We lowered the objectives because we weren't nowhere near them. So it was kind of a.
Sorry, population objective?
Yes, the population objective.
Yeah.
We lowered that quite a bit, and then we lowered the ratios too. And then here we are back again doing it again.
We lowered some population objectives. We did. I don't think we lowered buck-to-doe ratio objectives. I
We
mean,
did
in
in a
this
few units.
region, because I worked here in this region,
Yeah.
we didn't.
Well, I'm not saying in this region. I'm just saying as far as in the state, I'm pretty sure we lowered some other units too. But it seems to me like we're sacrificing the opportunity to see bigger herds on the landscape for opportunity to have a tag in our pocket. And we're just keep going down the same track. And I thought we did, but maybe I was wrong. So sorry.
We did lower the objectives on some units.
Sorry, guys. I had one more. Forgot about. Dax, that 30%. I mean, I don't know exactly how many we're selling right now, but that on a really bad worst case scenario, we're talking 15 to 20,000 tags.
Statewide.
statewide.
Yeah.
That's quite the jump. I mean, I like the idea of being able to have that leave room, but 30% just a little bit high. I don't, where did you get the 30%? Why not 15 or 20 even?
Yeah, we looked at most of the changes we make on most units are usually less than 30%. A lot of them are actually even less than 20% annually. And so we figured, I don't know that there was a magic reason we chose that number, but we just figured this will encompass most of the minor adjustments we make. And we figured if it's beyond this, we'll bring it through the public process and get more buy-in. So.
My name's Daniel Davis, for the record. Quick question when we talk about limited entry units, creating 1,000 lakes as another limited entry unit. Has there been any further discussion or consideration for Blue Mountain? I know I brought that up in the past and talked about it in some committees and things like that. And if there hasn't been, why not?
Yeah, and and Grizz was on the committee with us. I'm trying to remember if that one came up much. I don't know that I remember Blue Mountain coming up too much. And Grizz, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I
don't remember bringing it up. I know it was more pushed towards the elk side, if I recall right. But as far as on the deer, I didn't bring it up on the deer on that end.
And
But
we
kind of talked about it, but didn't really get brought up.
And now would be the time if that was something you felt strongly about, that's a recommendation the RAC could make. We did look at and talk about, which units are currently managed as limited entry versus general season. That was one of the questions in the public survey that we sent out to public hunters. And after weighing that out, I think we essentially decided to stay very similar to how we currently were, with the addition of the conversion of that 1,000 lakes unit to a limited entry unit, the rest of them staying how they currently were.
Is this agenda topic, is it going to cover one of the questions that Jake asked earlier about the extended archery, or is that going to be more in the hunt strategy tables with Dr. Hersey?
So we did put in the plan that we would have an extended archery hunt, like a standalone extended archery deer hunt. So if that is a strategy in the plan, so I think we can talk about that now. And like I said, there's some overlap on some of these things. If we need to do a little bounce around, we can.
But how to manage the permits and opportunities like that would be on the other topic.
I don't know. Ask your questions. Let's talk about it. We'll figure it out. Talk about potentially modifying current extended archery hunting, but ultimately decided to just keep it the way it was and add this as a new standalone add-on hunt, even though, yeah, it's kind of a unique thing. It doesn't really fit because it's not necessarily a specific unit. It's just kind of would be valid in all the extended archery areas across the state.
Did we do away with the Mighton hunt?
So that hunt, we had leftover permits after the draw the last couple of years. We had a lot of landowner complaints that don't like the hunt. We put a strategy in the plan this go around in conjunction with CWD that if we're going to call a CWD specific hunt for an area that's almost entirely private land, that we'll still recommend the permit numbers and take that through the process in the spring, but we're going to just distribute permits to landowners in the area rather than make it a public draw.
Has there been an increase in CWD in the Vernal Valley, Ashley Valley?
I might turn that one to the region. I don't know. I haven't looked at the CWD results recently. They're still coming in from the hunts this fall. I don't know that we have them all in yet. I don't know if you have more information than me or not, Dallin.
Just that we have had, over the past few years, we have had a few more CWD positive deer coming in from the Ashley Valley specifically, yes.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, we will then move to the electronic comments.
Okay, there were 10 people that weighed in on this agenda topic. 2 strongly agreed, 2 somewhat agreed, 1 was neutral, 1 somewhat disagreed, and 4 strongly disagreed. The weighted average on that was 2.7. So I'll kind of summarize a few of the comments that came in on this one. One said, it's a good plan, but how do we get deer numbers back from the hard winters? Next one was concerned about youth getting to kill any buck. I had to wait until I was 16 to hunt with no special opportunity. Next one said, what about opportunities for older people having difficulty getting around? Concerned about the deer herd, buck tag should be reduced in half. Hunters older than 18 should only be allowed to harvest a 3-point or better on general units. Need a management hunt on Diamond Mountain to reduce large 2- and 3-point bucks. Would like to see tags guaranteed every 2 years to allow families to hunt and maintain traditions. Would like to see statewide point restrictions. Would like to see statewide buck to doe ratio at 25 to 30 per 100. And the last comment was to hunt more bears. We should not have trophy bears on the landscape. That's it.
Okay, we will move to the public comment section. I only have 2 cards on this particular agenda. Did everybody on the RAC see the letter from Jeremy Anderson with the Mule Deer Foundation? He was on the Mule Deer Committee, and he just wasn't able to make it tonight. And he just wanted to show his support for it. It was a pretty wide, diverse group on the committee. Had representation from each region, and he just wanted to make sure that show that he had support, even though that everybody had their different views on it. And that the antler point restriction was voted by our committee at a minimum 4 times. Somehow last meeting was voted again on and approved. There are many studies show it doesn't work. However, their counterparts have mentioned the Southern unit for so long time. So done with this. So anyhow, and then on buck to doe ratios, having been a topic of discussion in most RACs, and feel that we didn't change that drastically in studies. We've shown that the lower ratios possibly help grow a herd. Also feels that this will give an opportunity. And lastly, items brought up with multiple times with 30% variance given the biologists. What I do agree with is that we have put these folks in some rough spots, and they're unable to do their jobs they were hired for, and they cannot manage the herd the way it was intended. Given that them the data that they have from collaring, capturing trends, I feel like they'll have this tool. They can do a much better, cleaner job for the next X amount of years. I think we were creative and found some ways to get more hunters and chance to draw. And I feel like the DWR did an amazing job getting us correct people to come and speak with us. It wasn't a perfect plan. I'm not sure one that exists makes all hunters in Utah happy, but I feel we did make good strides. We also want to show support for agenda items 6, 7, and 9 as well on here too for the Mule Deer Foundation. Okay, we will move to Tyrell A. Bagelin.
I guess. I don't know. To me, lowering the objective is like expecting less out of the regions. And I mean, you never hear of any employer that's going to expect less out of their employees. And to me, that's just kind of ass backwards. Like I say, we're sacrificing the opportunity to see the bigger herds like we used to. Everybody knows that we used to have bigger herds. It's undeniable, but we're sacrificing that for opportunity to have a tag in our pocket. And it seems like every couple of years we're getting more and more towards only having just a few units that are going to have anything at all.
The next public comment is Daniel Davis.
Daniel Davis, representing myself. Going through this statewide mule deer management plan, it seems as though we've targeted this plan for opportunity, towards hunter opportunity, and focused on that and the ability to get out and do what we all want to do. So I like that aspect. Little devil's advocate, I wasn't in favor of the 30%. But I have also sat on the other side and sat on the committees and seen where the hands get tied, personal beliefs get involved, and they get skewed a little bit. I myself would feel a lot more comfortable with 15%. Because as mentioned, a lot of those tag increases and stuff that have taken place and recommendations haven't even hit that 30, and the public had concerns with that. Those are our resources, right? So I feel we should have a little bit more say. I do want to give them the leeway though. So I would feel comfortable with the 15%. I want to speak to the CWD if this is the agenda topic we're going to talk about, and the extended archery seasons. When we talk about the ability to create opportunity, that's one of those ways that I think we can create a lot more opportunity. The whole purpose for these extended archery units is to harvest more deer in these rural areas. There's a lot of people that put in, granted with the solution of being able to just get that extended archery tag, but that does nothing for our local regions that we live in, because those people were the ones getting the box elder tags. What it created here was more of the local people waiting for a unit specific tag, being the South Slope, to hunt the Ashley Valley, primarily extended archery. Some on the Yellowstone as well. I think we should go unlimited on those, especially with the CWD problems that we're starting to see. Why not? That's the whole purpose of that hunt, is to hunt and to kill more animals, because they are problems. That's going to create opportunity on these mountain units for people that have to wait 2 to 3 years to draw an archery deer tag on a general season hunt. I don't choose to fight the private land boundaries and dibble and dabble with landmarks, barriers. I prefer to stay on the mountain. But those that want that permit just to be able to hunt the extended archery in November don't. And so I think we have the ability to accommodate both, open up those opportunities for those mountain hunts, and let those that want to just hunt the extended archery, let them hunt it. There's your opportunities for your youth. They can get a tag every year, which they already do at this point. Thank you.
All right, we don't have any more public. I think we're out. That's the only two on that one. We will move to the RAC comments. I'd like to start off. I sat on the Mule Deer Committee. It was a very diverse committee. We did have a lot of people from different parts of the state, and everybody had their own agenda. Everybody had their own ideas. There were a lot of things out there that some of the nights nothing got super heated. I mean, it was a better committee than I think some of the other committees that I'd heard about. There were some long nights. There was quite a few of them. I think Dax, he had a little less gray hair in his beard at the time, but not everybody got what they wanted. We all had to kind of make sacrifices here and there. We even had, I'm as guilty as anyone. I fought Dax on, there was a proposal to lower the South Slope down to, I don't remember what it was. It was either like $13 per 100 or per 100 does. And I fought him on that. And I knew that if we come back here, we'd have people here that would string us up if we did that. So that's why I kind of pushed back on that. Yeah, it was not didn't want to have in our backyard. There is good data out there. We did do a lot of this proposal to try to grow deer. It wasn't necessarily the studies that the data and the studies that we had shown to us was that if we can grow the deer, then you can possibly have more bucks on the landscape. And that's kind of how the agenda kind of went with a lot of it. It was, so we worked towards more growing deer, and that's where the buck to doe ratios was lowered. When we lowered it on them, was to be able to grow the herd larger and to get larger herds by the different studies that we had directly from from Randy and Brock and whatnot. And so that's kind of where the Mule Deer study, the Mule Deer proposal kind of went towards. Is it perfect? No. I think there's still some things we could fix on it, but I think it's a good place to start. I think there's places in there where we can see some growth on it, and we tried to make it fit with everybody. Like I said, it was a really diverse group. The one time we had a proposal out there to have the extended archery was its own standalone unit, and then came back the next week and it got shot down. And so, I mean, there was things like that went through there. And so there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of give and take. So is it perfect? No. There's things in there I'd like to see change, like maybe the 30%. I think when you hear that, you're like, oh, that's not bad. And then when you put numbers to it, you're like, oh, wow, that is a lot of numbers there as far as tags throughout the state. But I do support the plan. I do. And I'm thankful for Jeremy and some of the folks that went around to the different RACs to show their support of it as well too. So. Do you have any other RAC comments?
I just wanted to say thank you to the Mule Deer Plan Committee for all the hard work they put in and hashing through all the topics that I'm sure came up. And so I feel like this is a solid plan. Yeah, there are things that could go either way. You're not going to satisfy everybody's wants and desires in this plan, but I feel like it's solid. There's nothing that screams or seems alarming in this plan. And so I just wanted to say that I'm in support of this plan.
I would also like to express a couple thoughts. Also in support of this plan, there's been some discussion and comments about the 30%, and I'm impressed by the goals outlined here, reluctant to take away any ability of these folks to make decisions to try to reach the goals that they've set here. I think the goals are fairly diverse and can hopefully satisfy a lot of folks across the state. So I'd like to think about providing opportunity for biologists to make some choices based on this wildlife migration initiative that I've been watching for over a decade. Is one of the most impressive initiatives in the country. A lot of data there to make decisions to help reach the goals set forth in this plan.
Any other comments? There's no more comments, then I will move for entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the statewide mule deer plan as presented by the Division of Wildlife.
Natasha has made a motion to accept the mule deer plan as presented by the Division of Wildlife.
I'll second.
Jake Huber seconded that. We'll take a vote on it then. All in favor, raise your hands. Okay, passes unanimously. Next, we will move to Kent Hersey. And the hunt structure research proposal and R657-5. Oh, sorry, that was Dr. Kent Hersey, right? Is it official now?
Sadly enough, it's not official. I have to do my dissertation edits, so technically no, but yes. But yeah, I won't hear the end of that for a while. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one little clarification here. There was some confusion as to why we were bringing this around. If you recall, last fall, we brought around a similar proposal. It was met by, some people really liked it, some people didn't. At the board meeting, they wanted us to take that and run it through the committee since we were doing the deer plan, see what the committee thought of it and see what they wanted to do. And so what you're seeing presented this time is what the committee came up with and what they'd like to see. And we as a division support that as well. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Did everybody everybody see the proposal?
If you'd like a summary of it, I can certainly go through that as well.
Yeah, does everybody need a summary, or is we good, or? I think we're all kind of good. I guess we'll just start with the RAC questions. That good?
Yeah, that's great.
Why was a 4-point chosen and not a 3-point for the APR unit?
So we have done 3-point in the past. We have not done 4. With 3-point, what we see is that you save the yearling bucks, but it puts pretty much all your 2-year-old bucks are open to harvest. And so anything 2 or over, so you're pretty much left with a lot of yearlings after the hunt. And then so you have a bunch of 2-year-olds the following year. But what a lot of people want, they're looking for better than a 2-year-old, I guess. So with this proposal, we're trying to provide the ability to save the yearlings as well as 2-year-olds. And so making a lot of 3-year-olds available the following year is what the idea behind it is. And I guess beyond that, I think we have a lot more data that suggests that 3-point or better does not do what's intended. It puts all your pressure on the 2-year-old pluses. And so what we've seen in Utah and what pretty much every other state has seen is that it does have a slight increase to your overall number of bucks, buck to doe ratio you'll see, but it actually lowers your mature bucks per 100 doe. So we don't feel confident that that would be accomplishing the goal of providing that additional opportunity and providing more opportunity to harvest mature bucks. With the 4-point, it's a little more uncertain, so we're willing to give that a try and see if that might help.
Okay. Isn't this gonna just drastically inflate your buck to doe ratio on that unit?
It depends exactly how the population performs. Right now, we are in a good period down there. We've gotten good moisture, had good survival, good recruitment of fawns. So yeah, we are above buck doe ratio objective right now. And if that pattern continues and we restrict harvest, certainly that buck to doe ratio would increase. That Pine Valley area is subject to some pretty severe droughts. We had them just in 2018, 2020, and it really knocked things back. So depending on exactly what recruitment is, it will change things. But if we do have good conditions, it would increase the number of bucks there, and we'd be looking to add additional tags to try and reduce that, which is exactly what I think the research is trying to get at. Can we provide additional opportunity to hunt bucks and provide opportunity to get mature bucks? So for the APRs, it's saving the young bucks, letting them become mature. And can we add some opportunity to do that? Right now, that's one of the hardest general season tags to draw in the state, I think 5 years or so. So I know some people are concerned if we had too many tags, it could create crowding issues. But also there's also a giant demand for that permit. So it's a tough situation to be in.
Okay, but so you're basically going to be trying to let all the yearlings live and at least half of the 2-year-olds live each year. So
yeah, probably. And from check station data, it's about 3/4 of the yearlings are less than 4 points, or the 2-year-olds, I'm sorry, less than 4 points. So it will put a big chunk of those forward as 3-year-olds. And obviously, we're not going to get all of the 3+ either, so there will be some there.
do you guys have an estimated percentage of how many yearling and 2-year-old bucks are in the buck to doe in your current
Yeah.
projections post hunt?
Yeah, from what I recall from Jason said, this is back previous year, so I don't know what his buck-to ratio stuff looks like now, but it was about $5 per 100. Those were mature bucks out of the 20-ish or 22. So
So that 3-year-old mark.
probably about 3 to 1 roughly.
I had a question. So on I know it was talked about the younger bucks dying sometimes in natural causes. They have a harder time staying alive. Is there a big difference between like the southern area and northern or northeastern area in mortality for those 1 to 2-year-old bucks? It's
So
not
when-
hunter mortality.
So when we presented that, we're not sure, I guess is the real answer. The data from across the state that we have suggests that maybe up to 50%, 55% even of those yearling bucks from 1 to 2.5 are dying in some years. And that's been taken statewide. We never really had a great sample of that on each individual unit. So we kind of pulled everything across the state. Last year, we did focus on some yearling bucks in southern Utah only. We collared about 80 of them across southern Utah on the Boulder, Zion, Pine Valley, and Monroe. And we saw survival about 70%, which is a lot higher than what we had seen. So was that a southern Utah thing? Was it just a 1-year anomaly? We're really not sure. We did have a great year in southern Utah, better survival year for does, fawns, and bucks than we had up north. It was really good conditions. So we're not surprised we see some variation, but in drought years, is it going to get worse in southern Utah? We're not sure. So that's something we're kind of starting to look at more. We have some plans to get some buck collars out in greater numbers up in northern Utah this year, as well as the southern Utah. So we're just going to keep looking at that.
I just got a couple questions. So when these restrictions have been discussed, why was there only one area or like one unit per restriction? You know, we talk about weather in different areas, and we know there's different variables in the state, southern versus northern. But why maybe wasn't there 3 or 4 different units proposed, 4-point or better, to see maybe what some of them variables with weather and different things get you better data than just one?
Sure, and that's a great point. And typically when we do research studies, we like to have a lot of those replicates. But the reality with antler point restrictions, there just wasn't a lot of support for it within the committee. They voted on this one. The only person really pushing it wanted it for the Pine Valley. There wasn't a whole lot of people who wanted to see it. And even with that, it failed several times on votes. And ultimately at the last meeting, with the addition of the youth can kill any buck, it wasn't able to get enough support to pass. But it just there wasn't a giant appetite for it. Yeah, and that's why we do have multiple units. There was a lot more appetite for weapon restrictions, not in every corner of the state, but we do have Boulder, that Beaver West, and they wanted a unit up north, and the cache is why that's been added to it. Other units were discussed, and every unit was on the table for people if they wanted it. These are the ones that the committee wanted to focus on. But we also didn't want to go too big with it, as we don't know what the full appetite is of the public to have these.
I think that was the biggest thing on there, was that we decided to keep it small versus try to make a big one, a big study through the state to see what the appetite was, and start small and go bigger later on was kind of the approach that the committee took.
On those restricted weapon types, does the division have any thoughts on like how many more permits you'll be able to provide?
Not a great guess. No, it depends. Will it really decrease success, or will it shift pressure so that people who, instead of harvesting a 4-point from 800 yards away, are they unable to get to that buck, and now they're taking a yearling? So, we do expect some success to decline, of course, but will it be a huge number enough to issue? We don't know. We're trying to find that out, I think.
On the Pine Valley unit, are there currently like a lot of big 2 points and 3 points? I know that's been a fear, but is there some now? Or do you feel like it's not really prevalent?
There certainly are some. I think I was just, Jason Nichols is a biologist down there. I was just looking at some of his classification. I don't think he had any mature 2 points in it. There were some mature 3s. But I can't give you a percentage, but obviously there are some. Is it a huge number? I don't believe so.
Any other RAC questions?
Just one more on the 4 point or better, I guess. It sounds like kind of there's been thrown in there the youth, having the opportunity to shoot anything. That's kind of how maybe this got passed through the committee. I mean, is that, I know it's been talked in other RACs, is that distorting the research that you'll be doing or I mean, I'm just not quite sure how that will affect, the research that you're doing if however many youths out there can shoot anything.
Sure. And I don't think it's a deal breaker. It biologically, it muddies the waters a little bit because rather than just having all your pressure up top, it's allowing some of those other bucks to be taken. It is only 20% of the tags, so it's not a huge component, and youth tend to have a little lower success than others. So, and we know what's a youth, what's an adult, so we can kind of look at success spread out between them and account for that. But no, it won't be as pure from a implementation standpoint and from a support from the committee standpoint. As you said, this is what kind of put it over the edge, I think. If we were ever to actually, if it was something the public likes and we wanted to move forward with it and expand it for sure, I think this is something we'd probably go with this kind of recommendation. So it is nice to research what you would actually implement as well. So there's some plus sides and some downsides too.
Was there any talk about using like the early rifle hunt, splitting it so there was still both hunts and using like the early rifle hunt as either, a limited number of early rifle hunts can still use whatever they want and the normal rifle hunt?
Yeah, there was
restricted
some,
weapon.
I think, it seemed like the committee wanted to have more of a pure all or nothing type for the study. If it's acceptable and we actually move forward with these recommendations, that's certainly a way we can implement it in the future and just have early hunts be normal rifles, late hunts be restricted, or vice versa. There's lots of options, but I think this will give us the best idea of kind of going back to the Pine Valley. This is a cleaner way to understand exactly what these restrictions are doing for the population biologically. And then if we actually implement it, maybe we would go differently. But it kind of, with the Pine Valley, we didn't go the pure route, and that was just because the interest wasn't there. So.
Any more RAC questions before we move on? Okay, I'll move on. We'll move on to the public questions. Are there any questions from the public?
Hi, Rail. Hey, Bigman. Kent, I mean, I'm kind of glad we're finally doing this. I mean, it's been kicked around for over a decade now. I mean, I completely disagree with it. I think that the 3 point or bigger on the Monroe and the Book Cliffs is what ruined the genetics on those two units. But if we're going to try this, why not try? Why are we trying it kind of half-cocked, where we're letting this exception and that exception? And actually, if we're going to try this 4 point or bigger thing, let's just do it all the way across the board. So that way. Because I mean, I'm worried that later on we're going to have, well, what's the chances later on when we find out it don't work that we blame it on those exceptions that we allowed?
Yeah, those are good points. And I guess, I think, as I said, I think we can control for it. It's not going to be pure, but yeah, the reality is in wildlife research, there's always things that you can look at and not be pure. So we don't have the lab setting.
But like I say, why not do it all the way across the board with what we can control? I mean, with the limited entry, and I hate to say it with the kids,
Yeah.
just all the way across the board on this unit. If we're really going to try this, let's give it a wholehearted effort.
And that's a very valid point. And if that's something that the RAC and the board ultimately decides they want to go with it, we can do it that way for sure.
Daniel Davis. I have a few. Luckily Tyrell covered the first one, so maybe that'll save some time. When we talk about the current state of the Pine Valley unit, where are we at right now? We mentioned cutting tags by 50% just a few years ago. Are we on a big rebound in the Pine Valley?
It's been rebounding for the past few years. I think, I don't have any data from this year, but last year's buck to doe ratio was 23 bucks per 100 does. So above objective, and with the survival rates, and we should have a growing population from last year to this year as well.
So studying a lot of the APRs that's been performed in the state of Utah as well as surrounding, because there's been quite a few in the West, because it's a sportsman's approach, not necessarily the best biological approach. Pine Valley have some limited access that creates more hiding space for the deer, perhaps.
It's pretty public. Yeah, so I don't think it has a ton of refuge areas.
And the reason I ask that is, why did we not consider, because are we not worried about a one size shoe fits all, like Tyrell said, because we have a unit that's rebounding and it's at its peak right now. So could we prematurely be setting this unit up for a false success?
That is a big concern of ours. If we can't get the buck doe ratio within the parameters, and that just keeps growing and growing. And we do have a concern that we would be looking at the effect of increasing buck doe ratio rather than what the antler point restriction would be. So that's something we definitely want to be able to adjust the tags so that we can maintain the buck doe ratio at its set objective, rather than allowing that to grow to 25, 30, whatever it might be.
So what would happen on this hunt or this particular unit, or maybe some of these other restricted hunts that become desirable in this time frame, right? It's going to be a few years. So we're going to see whether it's good or bad. What do we do about lifetime license holders? Will I have an opportunity to hunt that, or will I lose all them tags, them lifetime license holders?
Yeah, right now, lifetime license can put in for any unit or can get a tag for any unit of their choice. I don't think we have plans to change that. And there's also some real legal ramifications of possibly doing that. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't get into that stuff. One thing we're definitely interested in understanding is how applications and interest changes with these. Do people really want them? Do they are they showing us they want them by applying for them? And does that change those odds? Does it change the odds of surrounding units? And that goes for the restricted weapons units as well as the Pine Valley with the APRs. And I know there's a lot of fear about everybody wanting to put in for Pine Valley because it'll be so good, but there's a lot of people out there who don't want that restriction and would avoid it. So it'll be interesting to see how that occurs. If there is a major shift, I think, that's why we're only doing it as a study purpose right now. We're not doing anything permanent. We're just planning it for 4 years. So I don't think it would be a huge concern for most people, but if it is major, maybe it could impact things sooner than that. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So based on speculation, we're at 23 per 100. We're going to shoot for 18 to 20. How much more opportunity are we going to see there? Because typically APRs are modeled more for an opportunity type hunt. They haven't shown in most cases, I'd say 90% of the cases, that we actually grow more deer or create more mature bucks as stated. So initially, how much more opportunity are we looking at?
I don't have a number right now. I can say that last year we had 3,200 permits on that unit, which is quite a bit low. We average 4,000, 4,500 over the previous 5-10 years. So there is a lot of room for growth just under the old system. Whether this will allow for greater permits, even well above and beyond that, that would be, if it meets the objectives of what we're looking at, that would be the hope, I guess.
Was there any consideration within the working group that would provide youth, one, the opportunity, but two, as a useful tool to help manage buck to doe ratios by harvesting those yearling class bucks that we may be losing out on due to survival rates?
I think it was brought up briefly, but it didn't have any traction at all. So it wasn't discussed in depth. That is the premise of our elk management, and it does work very well, but they're also a lot longer lived and don't have these giant fluctuations in survival. So whether that would be successful or not, I can't say. And whether it would be accepted by the public, I can't say. But yeah, it does follow what we do with elk, and that yearlings seem to have the lowest survival in some years, but not necessarily every year, apparently. So yeah, it's a possibility and something we could do at some point for sure.
Last one, Mr. Chair, this is a hard one. Would the state be geared up to not apply the single source research area and make it statewide?
Statewide antler point restrictions?
Yes.
Ultimately, I mean, could it be done? Yes. Would that be acceptable? I don't believe so. Based on what the committee wanted and others, I find it hard to believe that would be acceptable by the public, and the division would not be in favor of that.
Why?
Is because there's a lot of people who don't want that. And we would not want to shove something down at a statewide level without knowing how many would. So if that, I mean, we're willing to try it. We're happy to try it. We could even try it on multiple units if that was what the committee recommended and what ultimately goes forward through the RACs and the board. But going to statewide would be a major, major change. And we would have some real concerns about that.
So on this study, I lied. Good thing I didn't swear on anything. On this study then, does the Pine Valley see winter survival issues?
Generally not winter survival. It does not have the harsh climate of northern Utah. We do see drought-related survival issues. So we'll actually see more mortality over the summer months compared to a lot of other units. So it's like winter isn't the limiting factor down there. They can bail off into the Mojave and get out of, even in the areas where they have snow, it's not the deep snows that we get up in northern part of the state. But it can get really hot, really dry. Especially if the monsoon rains don't come, it can cause real problems.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Hersey.
Any more public questions? Okay, then we'll move on to the electronic comments.
Okay, we had 13 people respond on this agenda topic. 4 strongly agreed, 5 somewhat agreed, and then 4 strongly disagreed. The weighted average on that was 3.38. So I'll go over a few of the specific comments that people left. This first one says, I support restricted weapons proposals and feel that traditional archery should be included for all restricted weapons hunts. This approach is a step in the right direction to start promoting weapons that encourage less technology in our hunting strategies. Over time, it could lead to increased hunter opportunity and increased herd health. This next one says, please use restricted weapons proposals and include archery. The next one's recommend cutting back on the size of rifle scope or add an open sight hunt. Next one is he likes the 4-pointer better hunt. Please implement it statewide. It should also apply to archery as it has never been easier to harvest an animal with a bow. Agrees with restrictions for units, but concerned about large 2-points that need to be removed due to genetics. Would like to see an outside the ears restriction. Another comment talked about needing to clarify the language about rangefinders and scopes. Concerned about the cost of new firearms for those who hunt a restricted weapons unit, specifically the cash unit. They want a 4-point or better for adults, but allow youth to shoot any legal buck. The strategy should include the northeastern side of Utah. Should have 2 units for 4-point or better to get better data. It would also help to not flood the Pine Valley unit with applicants. Allow red dots for people with aging eyes on rifles rather than iron sights. They'll have to buy a new gun. Traditional archery should be included for all restricted weapon hunts. Would like to see more units restricted. And the last one is to recommend a 3x9 maximum scope power and restrict long range scopes.
Just remind everybody that if you want to make a comment, the cards are out there. We only have a couple on this one as well. So if somebody'd like to make a comment, still have time to bring it up. So we'll move to the public comment section. Rodney Smith. And then after him, we'll have Daniel Davis.
Rodney Smith, I'm just a local sportsman here. I just want to get up here and say, thank you for being here, but mainly, all the people who are on these committees spending time away from their families. I was on the Houndsman Association for a lot of years with Daniel. And anyways, it takes time, takes time away from your family to work on stuff that you're passionate about. So thanks for all the committees. Also, I'm in favor of, these new recommendations and these new proposals. Let's try something. Let's try and help the deer out. Let's come up with something. I'm excited about this, and the keyword in, what's going on in Pine Valley. My wife had that tag last year and it was a fun hunt. It's not a lot of cedars down there, so it's not a walk in the park. There is a good amount of private property as well. But, I think the key thing that we can take away from this is, and I, kind of mimic, let's just not do it on Pine Valley. Let's look at other units. Let's talk about maybe doing it on the North Slope. Let's do it on the Manti. Let's, because they are going to get bombarded down there on, Pine Valley. But I think the main thing is, the key word is youth. Let's get the youth involved. Let's give them an opportunity, to see deer, my son had a deer tag last month. We went out, didn't see a damn thing. So, also last month, we went down to Arizona. He had a javelina tag and we were successful on that. But he also was like, man, I wish I had, and it was youth only. They had youth only javelina, youth only deer. And he's like, man, I really wish, I had a deer tag because we've seen a lot of deer down there. And I understand you can't compare Utah to Arizona or Colorado. I get that. You can't compare different things, but the main thing is, let's work on the youth. Let's help them out. Thank you.
Daniel.
Daniel Davis for myself. As you all heard from the questions that I asked, I have a real fear of one size shoe fits all. If we're gonna try studies, we need to study every environment, every unit we have. They're all drastically different, from the high mountains to the desert, everything in between. We have limiting factors all across the board. I personally feel that we're dealing with some backyard stuff and it's thrown around a lot. If we want to go with these data studies, pick one and roll it statewide. That's the only way we're going to measure success and failures. Be it 4-point and better for the adults, first 2 years of youth, they get to kill 2-point or less. Use that as a tool for an opportunity to make sure and manage your buck to doe ratio in those limits and those ranges. I'm just saying there's ways of doing this, but picking 1 unit, 2 units here, I have big concerns when we see that, because then when we go try to implement it somewhere else, I have a big fear that we're setting high with the Pine Valley. We're at peak. And the minute we do this, it's going to give us a false success. And I think we're going to chase something that's going to look great for the first few years, and then it's going to fall off really fast. Because all the APR studies show everywhere it's been done that it doesn't increase buck to doe ratio. If it does, it's very limited. Well, we're already exceeding it. So if that's the way we want to go, let's do it statewide, see where it works for everybody. I do think that it opens up that opportunity for the youth to get them bought in. We have a lot of youth opportunity in the state. The biggest thing that I think was a huge win is those youth elk tags, getting to hunt every season of the youth elk hunt for the any bulls and spikes. That's huge. Heck, I remember when pretty much everybody had a deer tag. Now we can grow deer and grow numbers and still provide success. I think we get so focused on my backyard, I want it this way. If we're going to study it, or go back to all the data and listen to the data, because it doesn't grow more deer, but will create more opportunity. Thank you.
And that was our last public comment on that one. So we will move to the RAC comments. I can start off. The antler point restriction, I remember when we first started the committee, I was pushing that one. I was one of the only, there's like two of us in the room that really wanted it. And the only reason why I wanted it is I just wanted to try it, be done with it. If it doesn't work, let's know. Don't ever bring it up. And that was kind of the reason why. I've seen it done in the book cliffs. I did see a lot of negative with it when it was in the book cliffs when I was a kid. But I do have a lot of people around here that really wanted it, supported it. And that's why I pushed it. That, like I said, it died and we were done with it. And then it came up last hour. And some of these other units, the reason why we picked what we picked was it was smaller. Even some of the units up here came up, but we found reasons why it may not work as well. So with some of the antler point, or not the antler point, but the weapon restrictions, some of that we talked about, even possibly the north slope, and we had some reasons why it didn't, and it ended up coming down to just these units that we had. Part of the reason why was we didn't want to do every unit in the state too much, because then we were afraid we'd have way too much pushback on it. So that's why we tried to push for kind of a smaller study on scale, but try to still be representative on it. And that's kind of hope that to see what that smaller study would do. And that's kind of why we chose the smaller, the fewer units that we did on the different things. Listening to a lot of people on the limited weapon restrictions, you got a lot of people are kind of excited about it from the different racks. Yeah, there are some people that are frustrated with it. They don't want to, it's bad enough last year that we passed the no scopes on the muzzle loaders. And I still got friends that don't even want to talk to me about it. But even though I did vote no here on it, but that's a whole nother thing. But so that's kind of, the thing you get is we're all passionate about it, and we all have our own opinions, and we had to make some compromises, and that's why we felt like this was kind of the best way to come about it, to try it out, see what it is. So anyhow.
I'll not leave too much silence. Couple thoughts I've had. Appreciate again everyone that's worked on this. In some ways, there is something that is going through the whole state, and that's just looking at the lowering the buck to doe ratio. So I think that is something that in general is going across the board. Our Yellowstone unit is not lowering. It's still that 18 to 20. And I know there's some, different factors there, but one of the things I'm I guess supportive of trying this antler point restriction, because a lot of those other studies were later at, I don't know how many years ago. There's some that might have some current opinions right now, but where we have a lot of tools now, and the biologists have a lot more tools now, like Grizz said, there's going to be a lot better documentation of what it really will do. I know there is that concern, like in the Book Cliffs back, and can't remember how long ago, but back then were people hunting differently than they are now. I would say, yes, they are. They're killing things easier. They may not be hunting as much for meat as they were back then. I don't know. There's definitely some different factors there. I also know there was some concern about the wounding rates and things, and I feel like that's something I don't know if I've seen a lot of education about that, but I think that's something that's important is, if we're going to these more restricted weapons, I do feel like there needs to be an emphasis on being better hunters in terms of taking the right shot, following up on the shot, whatever it might be. I liked how someone said, I think it might have been the Northern RAC, but we might need to have some more stories about the one that got away. Cause I know I'm an archer and now my kids hunt with guns, and man, they kill stuff. It's easy almost. But having that myself, I had a lot of close calls growing up, and that didn't deter me from hunting. That just drove the fire deeper. And maybe that's just a personal thing. Maybe the youth these days won't be driven if they don't have the trophy. Hopefully not. But I think that is a factor to deal with is, define success for the youth, and it doesn't always have to be a kill. And because, I wonder about recruitment. Is recruitment affected by their successfully killing something, or is it the experience? And I would hope that it'd be the experience. Again, having close calls and the one that got away always brings you back. I also really liked, I think it's Steve Sorensen's comment about the sardines. I totally agree. I think there's people that don't get out as far and deep as there used to be, because we do find old sardine cans back in the day. The hunter crowding issue, I think it's more of the hunters not wanting to leave the roads, but that's totally fine. Keep staying on the roads. If you have a side-by-side, just don't go too far away from it. We like you guys, but just having that experience and having some more opportunity, I do think there's ways for every type of hunter to have the experience they want to if they put the work in. And having some of these different opportunities and different weapon types to choose from are going to, allow that. And I think that really is one of the only ways, probably the only way to increase opportunity, as well as, what's the second half? Just increasing the opportunity to hunt, and then also increasing maybe the size or number of bucks that you see. So that's been my comments.
So the APR thing, I kind of wish they would have. I'm torn on that. I see the data. It's something I've always supported, trying for a long time, but then you see all the data saying it doesn't do anything, doesn't work. I still want to try it. I do kind of wish they would have picked a unit up here to give it a try on, and I don't know if maybe that's something we could recommend as a RAC, if everyone else is supportive of it. But yeah, that's where I feel on that.
Yeah, on a couple of these things. So I'm really excited to see some weapon restrictions and to see what that does. I'm kind of with Jake on the 4-point or better. That's the reason I asked the question. I think there's 4 or 5 different areas that we're sampling for the weapons restrictions, but there's only one for the point restriction. And that's what has me concerned, not necessarily to try it and to put it to bed, but we're already trying that on a unit that's already over objective, and where that's coming from, I'm not sure, but I'd be excited to try it, but I think that they ought to be able to try it in different areas of the state. So if there's weather and different things, would give them hopefully some better data to know if it does or doesn't work.
If I had made a motion to suggest we extend that to the Northeast region somewhere, one of the units. I don't know how we would do that, if we just pick a unit now or ask the DWR to pick a unit for us, or did you guys have any discussion about that, Grizz, in the any units other than Pine Valley for the APRs?
Be honest with you, at the kind of tail end, it was let's do one, and kind of was at the Pine Valley, kind of came up towards the end, and that's kind of what we stuck with. It wasn't, I mean, at the beginning, you got shot down like say 3 or 4 more times, and we agreed, let's do it on the Pine Valley. It was kind of one of the last things, and didn't really pick any of the others. But hey, we're open for a motion. You got a unit in mind? We're here, you know? But if there's no other RAC comments, I'll entertain the motion.
The only thing I wondered is, you know, we're right here next to Colorado. We have the chronic wasting disease. That would be maybe one area I wondered, like, do we want to keep a lot of big mature bucks right next door to a higher CWD on any units right here on the border, or if it's better to, you know, can take that into consideration.
So are you saying we'd want a triad on a unit next to Colorado or not?
I would say I would be hesitant to do that, I guess, because of the proximity.
I guess I'd just say, I think I like the idea to try something. Deer herds have been going down for a long time. Let's try something to help it out. I like the idea. I was a youth when they got rid of the antler restriction in the booklets and didn't get a hunt for like 5 years. So I'd say I'm not a fan of those. But if the southern unit wants, it sounds like southern unit to push this, so they will, I guess if they want it, they can have it, I guess.
There are other units. There's 9 Mile. It's kind of away from things. I don't know. Just putting one out there.
I mean, if you propose it, maybe you could say an area, but I think the division should choose the unit based on information that they have or data, not us choosing it, but maybe like Northeast region or, something like that. That's my opinion.
Can I just ask one question? When we talk about being pushed in southern Utah, is that through the RAC process? Is that through questionnaires? Or where does that come from, I guess? Can you answer that?
Yeah, so I mean, the majority of our comments regarding restrictions and antler point restrictions tended to come from southern Utah over the years. Through the RAC process, we've seen support and against through all during this RAC. Specific to the committee, there was one member representing southern Utah who was most in favor of it, and that was what drove it, and is why Pine Valley was selected.
Well, I got you there. If we was to recommend that, do you guys have a unit in mind for the Northeast region that you would consider?
I don't. I would definitely stay away from limited entries. The Book Cliffs and Diamond would be out.
I mean the general season.
But yeah, we'd have to talk with Dax and the biologists, and if that's something that the RAC and board ultimately wanted to do, we could try it. But I'm not sure which would be best.
With the intent, sorry, pull you back up. The intent was this 4 hunting season time period for this study. And I think that meant that you weren't necessarily intending on changing anything in the 4 years. Like you wouldn't want to add something in year 2 or like add another unit to that study, or is that still on the table?
I think adding it we prefer it right now. From the study side of things, that would run for 4 years. So if we wanted to add a unit to the study for the purposes of replication, that's something we want to do right now. We have the ability to do that. If we're going through this and we see these strategies are really popular and people are liking them, the season structure that Dax will be proposing next will be up for renewal in 3 years. So if we were going to try something different with things, that would probably be when we could add units. That wouldn't necessarily be adding into the study. And so we wouldn't be focusing on the data side. We could just look at some of the things we've learned already and see if it's some, if we wanted to try and add anything. So yeah, I think the study pretty much, we'd like to go 4 years. If it's an absolute disaster for whatever reason, we can always stop it short or, so we have the ability to change things, but we don't really have the intent to, especially for the study.
So I'd like to have something in our region. Like, we don't have anything in our region, so. No, that's.
I just wanted to bring up, I see it doesn't look like we have a tribal rep here tonight, but that is potentially a complicating factor if you have large chunks of a unit. You know, we're all within the exterior boundary, like a large percentage of this region is within the exterior boundary, and we don't currently have a cooperative agreement in place with the Ute tribe. Things are a little tenuous right now, and I don't know that we could necessarily require the Ute tribe to follow that regulation. I just bring that up as something to take into consideration.
That'd be something you'd probably just have to coach your officers on, I guess. I mean, I'll make a motion that we pass as presented, but direct the wildlife board to add a unit in the Northeast, a general season unit to the antler point restriction in the Northeast region.
Okay, Jake Huber makes a motion to accept the mule deer hunt structure research proposal and R657-5, right? All of that. Accept as presented, but to have the wildlife board make a unit in the Northeast region as a antler point restriction. Did I get that right?
A general season unit.
A general season unit, isn't it, with an antler point restriction? Okay. With that, we'll take a vote on it. All those in favor?
We need a second.
Oh, sorry, forgot. My bad. Do I have a second on it?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Nate Crepo seconds it. Okay. Do we have a vote on it? There with the raise of hand. All those in favor? So that's 4 in favor.
5.
5. I didn't see. Okay. 5 in favor. Those opposed? 3 opposed. Passes. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, or do you want to take, or just reconvene at 8 o'clock? Okay, we'll take a break here and reconvene at 8 o'clock. to the Northeast Region RAC. We will now hear from Dax Mangus on the bucks, the buck and bull 2025, 2027 hunt tables and dates. Did everybody get a chance to look at that? Do they need Dax to give any summary of it? Are they good with it? Got anything you need to add to it, Dax?
No, the basic season structure stays pretty much the same, what we've done for the last several decades. You know, we typically shift the seasons. It's all kind of built around when the rifle deer hunt usually just shifts, you know, maybe a calendar day or two per year. And then every, 6 to 8 years, you have a bigger shift, which we would see in 2027. There's a few new hunts. A couple of those are I guess we've got, the private lands, bull elk hunt, specific to this region. Happy to call up maybe some help from the region to answer any real specific questions there. And yeah, happy to talk through any questions you have or ideas or suggestions if you want to see something different.
Okay, we'll start with some RAC questions.
On that private land elk hunt, what was the reason you guys included the boundary all the way to the White River and to the Colorado border?
Yeah, so it's a private, the permits are only valid on private lands. There's not a ton of private land, or there's not a ton of private land over there, mostly just stuff along the river corridors. Some of it is irrigated agricultural land. So the idea in adding that was to encompass some of those irrigated agricultural lands adjacent to the river where we get some depredation concerns and
Is there
complaints.
a ton of depredation issues along the White River? I've never,
Some,
all the White River sections I've seen is not, doesn't really have much.
not a lot.
Yeah, can you just give a quick overview of that? I know I've had several people ask me, locals, that are just trying to verify what that hunt is, what the purpose is and how long it goes and stuff like that. So
I'll probably put Dallin on the hot seat here. We got Dallin Christensen, the regional wildlife program manager, and those guys had a elk committee, and it's something that we kind of opened the door to be able to do this in the statewide elk plan revision a couple years ago, and then they had an elk committee out here in the basin. I'll turn some time to Dallin. I think he can probably maybe give you better, more specific information than I can.
Yeah, so Dallin Christensen, I'm the Northeast Region Wildlife Manager. So the private lands bull tag is kind of it's a tool that we want to implement to help landowners basically deal with elk issues during that season, through the August through November season. So it's kind of part of a bigger plan, a bigger picture. A few years ago, if you remember, we brought through a new South Slope Yellowstone and also Vernal Bonanza Diamond elk plans. And in those plans, we kind of changed a few things. We're trying to use hunting pressure to kind of redistribute elk. On the Yellowstone, for example, we said that we would no longer count elk on tribal grounds, but only on public and private lands. And we lowered the objective and we'll only count elk in those areas. With that, we also reduced cow elk permits on the forest this year by about 225 permits. To kind of combat that and help with the issues we are seeing on private property, we're implementing this hunt. And basically what it is it's a hunt. The permits will be over the counter, sold first come, first serve. And it's only private lands inside the hunt boundary that you have. And it's really honestly just basically to help farmers and landowners have a tool to deal with elk damage and depredation that they receive. So does that kind of answer your question?
So I've heard quite a bit about this from private landowners where I'm representing the ag, that they would like more tags themselves to compensate for the damage, the fences, their crops, so that they get some type of reimbursement. Of course, you guys, I know you try, and we're trying to help them, but that's the feedback that I'm getting from them, that their family and their personal self, they can't get these tags because it's a first come, first serve, I guess, like you just said. But then they're the ones that are, you know, a lot of people in Tabby, Altamont, Upper Country, that I hear from all the time, they're the ones that are kind of up in arms about all the deer and the elk on their property, and they're not being able to recoup any, can't even go out and shoot them because they don't get a tag, and they can't go out there because they don't have anybody that they know that's going to hunt their property. And so here's a refuge.
Yes.
There's a refuge right here on my property, and nobody's, you know, coming to shoot them there to get them back either on the tribe or get them back onto the forest or something. So I think we need to look a little bit more to help the landowners.
Yeah, and honestly, that's exactly what this permit is for, is for those landowners to be able to have a permit to use on their land, their family, friends, you know, whoever they allow on their land to be able to hunt a bull elk, harvest one, and put that pressure on them. They can also, you know, charge a trespass fee if they choose to do so to recoup some of their losses. That's honestly what this permit is for.
Do you guys know about how many you're going to be offering? Is it an unlimited number, or are you guys capping them at a certain amount?
We will have a cap, you know, that'll come through the spring rack with permit numbers. We honestly haven't talked a whole lot about it. In the South Slope Elk Committee that we did have where we talked about this, we said basically that we wanted there to be enough that those landowners and people who wanted them would be able to buy them, and that they would be available to them. So we're not quite sure what that number is. Honestly, it might be kind of a trial and error thing for a few years, but it will have a cap, yes.
Maybe a follow-up to that. I didn't keep track because I bought mine early, but was any bull tags, they stayed available? Did they stay through the rifle hunt as well?
Yes, they were available even in the muzzleloader hunt, yes.
I think that's a good point. I want to bring that back up again, that no, we did not kill all the elk, right? But that is something that will help, you know, even if they couldn't get a private land tag, it's seemingly like there's more availability, I guess. It doesn't sell out in the first few hours.
Yeah, a big change from a few years ago for sure.
How are you going to offer those? I mean, with those tags, just curious on, is it first come, first serve? Are you putting in drawing? Are you basing that off of this guy's got 500 head of elk on him? This guy's only got 10 elk coming on him. This guy, I mean, because I worked depredation for several years on that side, all the way up to Tabiona and Hannah. And there were some landowners that had 500 head of elk on them, counted them. Then you had some landowners that the elk are only there during the nighttime. Then you have some that the elk are not there, period. How are you going to keep it so the people, they get a tag, but the elk, they never really see the elk? Is there an evaluation on who gets it? Is it just, I mean, I'm just curious.
No, it'll just be an over-the-counter permit, just like the bull permits, the open bull permits are now. So we'll set a quota. They'll go on sale, I would imagine, the same day as the other bull elk permits, and just whoever wants one can purchase one. And we're hoping, you know, that'll be the landowners or people who have permission or the right to hunt the private lands. Otherwise, it's going to be a difficult hunt for them. So,
do you guys have any concerns specifically in that Tabiona Hannah area? So I had a guy reach out to me and saying that this is just going to be targeted Wasatch bulls that pull in later in around this time of year, and that they're just going to be a slaughter on the Wasatch bull. Is there any concern with that?
you know, we see a little bit of movement between the two. Once they cross the road, they're not really a Wasatch bull anymore. Then they become a Yellowstone bull, and on the open bull side. We're not too concerned about that. You know, if that does become an issue in the future, we can look at it, but at this time, we're not concerned about it.
That was another issue I kind of had along the White Rivers. A lot of them bookless bulls travel. I know personally I've documented one that went 50 air miles from where he summered to where he was killed on the White River during the youth hunt. So that's one reason I brought up the White River boundary, is you're targeting limited entry bulls for an extended hunt, and those elk are in there from September to November.
Yeah, I mean, elk kind of do what they're gonna do. Yeah, once they, cross into that boundary, once again, they have to be on private property during the time period to be harvested. So
Then that tag will be good for anybody's private property. It won't be like it's only specific for this person's. So,
yes,
okay.
yeah, it's basically patterned after the private lands only antlerless permits.
I have one more question for you. For years, and you're aware of it, and a lot of the guys here, you have a resident herd like in Arcadia in different places, maybe say Pleasant Valley. Is there any thought of eliminating them? I mean, every one of them.
That's hard. With just the different land ownership in those areas where it's checkerboarded between Ute tribal lands and private properties. We share management authority over those animals with the Ute tribe, and they know those boundaries. They're good at running and getting themselves, out of harm's way. So honestly, that's just really not a possibility. We do try to put pressure in those areas, certainly to move the elk that are causing damage. That's what the private lands only cow tags are for. That's what these bull tags are for, to put pressure on those areas, to kind of redistribute them, push them away from the areas where they're not wanted. And that's totally what we're trying to do here. So.
Thank you. I mean, I talk to the dairymen and stuff when they go in and eat right at their cows. It's kind of a problem.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other RAC questions on this topic?
That's why, can you go through the three corners unit? I know I talked to you about this privately, but, why is the hunt structure on the three corners unit different than everywhere else?
So I don't know how long ago it was or how far back it went, but at some point in time, wildlife managers from Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming got together and talked about that elk herd in that three corners area, and those elk bounce around and move between the states. And one of the results from that meeting that happened, years and years ago, was an agreement to not have rifle hunts that started before October. So to not have September rifle hunts. And because of that, for many years, we've had pretty much the standard archery season up there, kind of mid-August through mid-September, and then have done the rifle hunt in October, and the muzzleloader dates have been later rather than end of September and the first part of October. We've done them, end of October and the first part of November. So that's why.
Okay. And then I guess I've seen in the other racks, you guys, you're thinking about maybe, so I was going to make a proposal to maybe make this the archery hunt, September only archery hunt, like is associated with our hams units. But you guys are open to going back to the normal structure?
Yeah.
Now?
So there is, there's the last couple weeks of September, we don't currently have any limited entry elk hunting occurring on that unit. So there's the potential to do something different there. Had some conversations with the region, and maybe the region wants to speak to that. It sounds like maybe they've had some updated conversations with Wyoming and Colorado. I think there's potentially an opportunity to do something there. Our recommendation was to just keep the same structure that we've had in the past, but this is the time to bring it up and have those conversations. I don't know, from the region, do you guys want to share maybe any updates on conversations there or preferences from the regional perspective?
I would just say, like Dak said, we used to have an agreement with Colorado and Wyoming, and that's something that we would like to kind of pursue. It seems like more of something that's come by the way, probably between all of the states. And so at this point, we really don't see much of a reason to not have those late September early rifle muzzleloader limited entry elk hunts. There's really not a reason why we don't have them on that unit. And so, just for simple, keep things simple, to keep things consistent, we would prefer that since it's a limited entry unit, we'd prefer that it follows the hunt structure as the other limited entry units.
So the only thing I would have a problem with that is it's a pretty small unit with not a lot of tags, and now you're going to distribute those small tags to three hunts instead of just one, and that's going to cause point creep to jump dramatically, I would imagine. Would you guys be willing to just move the archery hunt only in as a September archery season in association with the same season the hams units have for their archery only September season?
But I think that's certainly something that, you can propose and you as a RAC can vote on. I think we as a region would feel more comfortable with keeping it, the way that all the other limited entry hunts are. So just like you said, it's a small number of permits. So like the early rifle hunt it would only honestly be like 3 permits. The muzzleloader hunt would probably be like 5, maybe 4. And so it would be a small number of permits. We don't expect the amount of pressure that we'd be putting out there to really redistribute the elk or anything. Just, for simplicity's sake, I mean, all the other limited entry units have the early rifle muzzleloader mid-season, where currently on the 3 corners, we only have the mid-season one. We would prefer just to make everything, the same and make it as simple as possible to keep it consistent. So,
okay, wouldn't you have to pull them tags from the mid-season hunt right now currently, but you'd have to distribute?
Yeah, it would follow
divide them out.
it would follow the same splits as the other limited entry hunts, whereas right now it doesn't. So.
And you can make whatever motion you want. So, yeah.
Oh, I will.
we kind of care what Dallin likes and what Dallin wants, but no, we try to keep things consistent when we can. It is an outlier now. Our preference would probably be to move it to be more consistent. But if the RAC wanted to move it to keep it an outlier, but make it a better outlier, that's your prerogative and you can make that motion. And we'll survive.
Any other questions?
Going back to the private lands tag, I should have researched a little bit, but we noticed on our Wyoming tags this year, there was like a landowner voucher or coupon or something. And I think what my guess is that if we had gotten permission and killed an elk on private land and then filled out that coupon after we tagged our elk and gave it to the landowner, they could then go in and turn it in for some reimbursement. Has that been talked about as potentially a way to, I guess, further compensate some of the private land elk depredation issues, if they're willing? And I'm asking for on the public side, because a lot of times those landowners don't want really anyone to come except certain individuals, and it might be really hard to get permission to hunt either cow elk or bull elk on their property, especially bull elk. Maybe that's a way, rather than the other way I'm worried about when it becomes well, give me $5 or $6 grand and then I'll let you shoot that bull.
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Eric. And in the big game program, I haven't really been part of any conversations. I'm familiar with that program, that landowner coupon program in Wyoming. If a landowner lets you hunt on their land, you harvest on their land, you give them the landowner coupon, and then at the end of the season, they send that in and the state gives them some compensation for allowing that harvest on their land. We've got Chad here tonight from the Private Lands Public Wildlife. So wake up, Chad. We're going to bring you into the process a little earlier tonight. I don't know if we've talked about that much from the Private Lands Public Wildlife Program. I know in the big game program, I don't know that we've had many conversations about that. I don't know. Chad, do you have anything to add or want to weigh in? Or we usually make Chad wait till the very end of the agenda to say anything. And we'll see if he has anything to add. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I've actually hunted under that program as well, and it's kind of neat. I think that Utah's a little different in that we selected other programs, right? I don't know that program I don't know that it compensates any more than our walk-in access program does, right? It incentivizes harvest and allowing harvest on, but we already have a program that would pay similar to that. One of the things that we have in Utah they don't have is the CWU program. And so with that program, you're able to generate a lot of revenue on wildlife on your property and manage for wildlife on your property. And so these voucher programs just don't really compare, and there just hasn't been a lot of interest. And that's what they use on their larger ranches. So we already have a program that covers that. And when we've discussed it, it's just not something that, it's not equitable in the amount of money that it would generate for the landowner. And so the landowners haven't really been interested in it.
Thanks for walking all the way up there.
Any other RAC questions?
So, never mind.
Okay, then we'll move to any public questions on this topic. Last chance to just remind the people, if you want to make a comment, go fill out a comment card on this as well. I only have a couple on that one as well too.
Tyrell Bigland again. Dax, I don't know if this is a question for you or Dowland, but with the implementation of the private lands cow tags, and now we got these bull tags being implemented, is this kind of a precursor that in the future we're going to be cutting back on people's depredation tags, kind of see if we can get them to start letting people hunt on their land instead of giving the tags to them?
Yeah, in part, when we first implemented the private lands only cow tags, the idea was that these would replace where it's a long liberal season, and we try to set the quotas on those high enough that they don't sell out super quick, that type of thing. The idea is rather than, most landowners want less government involvement in their business. So if we can set up a system, put a system in place where if you're a landowner, you got elk on your place and you don't want them there, go buy a permit or have your family or friends or a person who's paying you a trespass fee, go buy a permit and come hunt elk on your land. So we're trying to put more tools, more power, less government interference in the hands of private landowners to deal with and manage wildlife conflicts on private lands. That is the idea, that if we have these powerful tools available to landowners, it can save them the headache from having to fill out a mitigation plan and wait for us to print them vouchers and get vouchers delivered to them. And then they distribute those vouchers, and then somebody has to go and redeem the voucher for a permit and come up. Instead, go down to Stewart's, buy your permit, and you're hunting in 15 minutes. That's the idea.
Okay, but it's not going to lower the number of depredation tags a landowner can get.
It wouldn't
in the future.
It wouldn't lower the limited number of permits that we're able to issue to landowners, but we have issued substantially fewer antlerless elk permits because of the program. So, but they still could request to do it the old-fashioned way and fill out a mitigation plan and ask us to give them vouchers. But we've done less of those since we've implemented like the private lands antlerless permits.
Again, Daniel Davis. Dax, you guys did a great job on the archery observation and how those two start dates and lining them back up, given a fair playing field. With that said, has there been any consideration with that mid-season hunt, delaying the spike hunt for those limited entry hunters to have some opportunity at them bulls without as much pressure as they have?
So I think that's something we committed when we passed the elk plan. I mean, the idea was that mid-season hunt, it's tougher because there's spike hunters on top of you. That's something I've heard from a few folks that are like, hey, it's still really hard to draw these mid-season permits. We'd love to have a few days without spike hunters. I think that's something we'll probably discuss when we do the mid-plan review for the elk plan, which will be coming up here. We wanted to get 2-3 years worth of data under our belt before we did that. I think that's something that we discuss. And I've heard, I had one person even say, what if you just opened the mid-season elk hunt on Friday rather than Saturday, even just gave them one one day before the spike hunters start hunting. I think that's something we probably would discuss with that committee and talk about when we did the mid-plan review.
But that mid-plan review would land in the middle of the season date structures, right? For the next 3 years.
So it might be 3 years from now before it would be implemented.
But changing that here in this process isn't outside of the boundaries, right?
That we're discussing season dates. Yep. You have
Okay.
the ability to make whatever recommended changes you want.
Okay. One more question to be a little more clear. With the private land only cow or the elk hunt, if we're going to harvest bulls, what bring bulls?
Sorry, what was that?
If I'm going to harvest bulls and target bull elk, what brings a bull elk in? Especially in your prime time when they're rutting, tearing up more stuff, corn, fences.
Good feeding cows.
Cows, right? And good feed
Yeah.
to a point, but the other head takes over, not their stomach. But anyways, keep it G-rated, sorry. The other question I had was,
Good feed brings the cows, cows bring the bulls.
perfectly stated. I think that's all I had for right now. Thank you.
Any other public questions? Okay, then we will go ahead and move to the electronic comment.
Okay, on this agenda item, 8 people left feedback on this. Two people strongly agreed, 2 people somewhat agreed, 2 people somewhat disagreed, and 2 people strongly disagreed. So it's pretty well evenly distributed, weighted average of 3. So just a handful of specific comments. There were 2 people that said they were not supportive of private lands elk hunt. Another person said reduced archery hunt to 20 days. Modern technology has made it easier to kill animals with a bow. Third comment was they would like to get rid of the spike hunt and the book lists. Fourth comment, cut deer tag numbers in half. And finally, a comment that said that they appreciate the division's efforts on complex private land issues in the Uinta Basin, supportive of the private lands elk hunt.
Okay, we will move to the public comment. First one is Bob Christensen, and then we'll follow it up with Daniel Davis.
Yeah, so Bob Christensen, just wanted to express support for the private land only bull elk hunt. I think that's a good thing. Aside from the depredation issues, I think it's anytime you get pressure on private land, push the elk back up to public. I think it's a good thing. It's good for the public land elk hunters as well. Also with the 3 Corners area, I would, being a muzzleloader hunter, I would support what the division was saying with their preference, that would be consistent with the other limited entry elk hunts. And then I know there's been a concern with an overlap of the youth elk hunt and archery elk on the general season. And on the elk committee, that was just discussed a little bit. The archery was given a few extra days, but at the end of their season to have a hunt a little closer to the rut, in which was going to overlap the youth elk hunt. And so that was talked about, and so there's a little bit of conflict out there on both sides with the youth and also the archery. I know it's been suggested to maybe push that youth elk hunt back, and so it overlaps the muzzleloader deer. And my recommendation would be not to do that. I know it's one hunt you're after, if you do that, and one hunt you're after elk, another hunt you're after deer, but there's same people on the landscape. Deer hunters are pushing the elk around, the elk hunters are pushing the deer around. Archery hunters have right now, about a month long, before that overlap occurs with the youth elk hunt. And with the muzzleloader deer hunters, that if you push that elk hunt back to overlap the muzzleloader deer hunters, you'll be overlapping most of their, or at least half of their hunt, and over the opening day as well. So my suggestion, if we do anything with moving those dates, would be to go back to the way it was, and take those extra days off the archery and put it back to the way archery was, and then you wouldn't have the overlap. I'm adding those days over to the archery, or on the archery, kind of created that conflict. And I don't think it's the right thing to do to push that conflict over onto the muzzleloader deer hunters. I would say if you want to reduce that conflict and to take those archery days back off and keep it the way it was before you added those archery days on that made the conflict. So yeah, I appreciate you letting me comment.
Daniel Davis, representing myself. First off, I want to speak off to the mid-season elk hunt. I would really like to have you consider that, doing a delayed start on that spike hunt. We're obviously adjusting the archery season date to bring it up. We can do the same thing with that mid-season hunt. Now's the time. With that said, I'd like to turn over to the private land only elk tags. I sit on the elk committee, and I was the big advocate that got that push for this region, because as the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation rep at the time, those concerns were brought to me from private landowners. So a way to mitigate that, and the issue that we had was those private landowners couldn't get a bull tag because we were selling out. Okay. A perfect environment would be just like our deer allocation, where if you have a certain amount of acreage, you as a landowner or your immediate family qualify for a certain number of permits. Me, I didn't see a need in limiting that, because when we have these issues on the private land, the elk are there, they're not. So when we sell trespass access to somebody that's trying to kill a bull, and I don't have cows on my place in the rut, how am I going to get a bull on my place? I'm going to tolerate cows. That defeats the whole purpose. A private land only cow tag was to help mitigate the number of the population and apply pressure. We removed those season dates on the late end. But the whole purpose was to give those landowners the opportunity. They're there every day. Their immediate families there every day. When that elk shows up, take advantage of it. When somebody's buying a tag and they're not here coming and going, they're not there. The minute we start advocating for the ability to generate revenue off of wildlife, we skew. We deviate from management. We're trying to push them elk back up on the force. We're trying. But the minute we start making bull hunts to where you have to pay access to kill one, we're going to now become tolerant of the cows. There's a lot of roads over there. A lot of people travel them roads. Now we're talking about increased population, because now I'm tolerant to cows because I can make $5,000 off of a trespass access. That's not where we started with that. And I would hope you would consider that in your proposal tonight, because those tags need to go to the landowners. They're the ones that have to deal with them. Give them the opportunity for tolerating. Manage the population by the females like we know we have to do, but give them the opportunity to have that fringe benefit for that duration of the season. They get that whole season. Let them, their kids, let their family, because if you have a cap, then they don't buy it. They don't get that opportunity. Now they have to sell a trespass access or beg somebody to come hunt their property, get rid of an elk. Let them do it. Guarantee them that process. And I don't agree with the boundary on the White River. I think we can stick to that 1 mile buffer, just like the extended archery. There's no ag ground out there for impact. I'm with Jake on this. I think we need to look closer at these areas that border our limited entry units and take that into consideration. And where there's not a big impact, let's tighten that border up and actually focus on the problem. Thank you.
Okay, we have no more public comments. We'll move to the RAC comments.
So I do have an issue with that private land boundary being the White River. If it was up to me, I'd just make it the same as the extended archery, or at least the Green River boundary on the east side. I guess it wouldn't be an issue having the northern boundary change a little from what the extended is, but I think the Green River should be the boundary on the east side of the unit.
I think we need to look more to the landowners on this private property and compensate them for these elk tags. You need to look at those gentlemen, those families, and take care of them first. Yeah, the public needs access to that, but they're the ones that are suffering from it.
I think to piggyback on that, again, as a public representative, I feel like this private land bull permit, the only thing I worry about is the monetization of that resource, but it also will mean pretty certain that those that buy that tag won't be able to buy another bull tag. So that would be their bull tag. So that group of landowners or family members that will buy that here in the Uinta Basin, they were the ones that were also buying a tag that could let them hunt on the mountain as well. So that will, in some ways, open up a little more opportunity for public land hunters and potentially drive some elk, onto the public land as well. So I guess I'd be in favor of that. I think that has been vetted with the elk committee and talked about. So I definitely support that. I kind of on the boundary, I also think just to simplify things, it might help to follow the extended archery boundary. Although there's just lots of boundaries, it's just important for people to be educated on where they're hunting and what their hunt specific boundary is. Yeah, I think that was all.
Like I mentioned before, I worked depredation for quite a while, chased a lot of bulls out of hay fields, out of cornfields that they demolished. And this will be a good tool, but I don't like the monetization side of it as much. I want it to, I see where it goes from it, where a landowner can tolerate an animal because he might be able to make a little more money on it. And I do see that end of it as well too, but I do see it being like it going to the families more. I'd like to be there a little more control on it versus that. I don't know. I know it's a great tool. I'm not totally against it. There's just some things on it that I would like to see tweaked on it is all. But it's definitely something that I think will help the landowners and be able to help over there. It's frustrating when you go there and you give a guy 20 elk tags. 6 months later, you go back and talk to him and he says, "Oh, I never filled an elk, one of them." Like, you had 500 head on you. And he did. He had 500 head, but he never killed one of them. And he said, "Well, I didn't have a freezer. I didn't have I gave you 20, I gave you tags to give to people." But anyways, this might help that where people come and, "Hey, can I come in there and do that?" And so and hunt there. And so maybe that's where it'll help on that end. But there are some things there that I'd like to see tweaked on it. But that's just my thoughts on that one. Any more RAC comments?
Does any of you guys that spend more time over on that western side have any issues with that? Them adding in the Hannah and Tabiona Valley area on that? I don't spend any time over there, so I don't know it all that well, but I did have a guy reach out saying that that's just going to be a slaughter of Wasatch bulls later in the year.
From my previous experience over there on that side, a lot of your bulls, they would get pushed on the end of the general season and then off of Tabby, and then they would run down across and they'd end up on the across the road and they'd get shot. One remember one day they called and said, "Hey, we got to get you over here. We got elk dead all over Tabiona." And turns out we didn't need it. They didn't need help because people were shooting them on other people's land, but they had permission. But that's how those elk got pushed onto there. That was just from mine. I know there are elk that do cross that, but a lot of these elk were ones where they're going back up on the tribe, and they're only there coming on down and off the tribe up in that Tabiona Hanna stuff. And that's where we've seen a lot of them. Some of them during the season, the guys had to be real quick when they got to them. And that's where a lot of them were coming from with my experience. And that was 20 years ago. So it could have changed since then.
Mr. Chair, if it's helpful, we did a big GPS collar study on the Wasatch a few years back. There's not a ton of movement of Wasatch bulls crossing the highway, maybe just a few. Largely, it's elk coming off dry mountain, coming off tribal ground, coming down, and we do have quite a bit of depredation issues in that Hanna, Tabby Valley area. There might be some Wasatch bulls. There definitely are. Elk do move, and especially bulls. But we were comfortable with the boundaries we proposed. We realized there will be a few. There's gonna be a couple guys that get lucky and run into a big limited entry bull that comes down, but not a lot. Not a lot.
While you're up there, Dax, I should ask this question earlier. Is there any appetite for, say, the spike elk hunt to, say, rotate on units per years? Like, I know now that we have everybody has to do the Harvest Service data, we can really say, okay, how many people hunted each spike elk unit? Because I'm not a huge fan of spike elk hunt in the Book Cliffs. I think it's hurt the herd. I know people here will argue with me in the audience, but from what I've seen, so is there ever an appetite to, like, say it has a rest year, another one? Has that ever been brought up before?
Yeah, when we redid the statewide elk plan a couple of years ago, we talked about the spike hunt quite a bit. Actually, after having all those discussions with that elk committee and taking it, the new plan out through the public process, the idea was more of that the spike hunt serves a purpose to, it's kind of like a family tradition type hunt. In a lot of regards, it's much harder to draw a general season deer permit on a lot of units nowadays. And the elk hunts, whether it's the any bull hunt or the spike hunt, have kind of in a lot of cases have taken the place of kind of the new family opportunity tradition type hunt. So you might remember we actually expanded the spike hunt and added it onto Diamond Mountain where we hadn't previously had it. So there wasn't a lot of appetite to limit it much more. In fact, we went the other way and probably expanded it. Those were the last conversations we had about that.
Sorry, I know this is comment, but can I just ask one question regarding the private land bull tags? I think it's a great, thing. I think it could be a great thing. I know there's been some concerns and maybe ideas of tweaking it. How long would this plan be? Like, is it something that 3 years down the road we revisit, and hopefully between these harvest surveys and different things, if it needs a little tweaking? I know I've got to sometimes get things started before we can tweak it to get it back to where it is going to be, 100% effective. So, I mean, how long would this take before we'd maybe revisit and be available to tweak different things?
So, yeah, right now we're proposing, for the next 3 years. So that would probably be the time frame we'd be looking at with this.
Since you're there again, in my mind, bulls are pretty smart. Like, if they get shot at, they're going to find a new place to go. But I also know of some landowners, like that's all they had in their cornfield was 20 head of bulls hanging out, not staying on tribal land or wherever. So I think that's something. But I guess in terms of bull psychology or whatever you have, like is that true? Like, do you feel like bulls are more apt to, once they get some pressure, to leave? Is there a difference between bulls and cows in that regard?
So behaviorally, they tend to segregate, sexually segregate where bulls are hanging out, usually in smaller groups or bachelor groups, sometimes even lone bulls. Earlier in the season and later in the season, they come together during the rut. Both cows and bulls are pretty darn sensitive to hunting pressure. If they get hunted very much, they figure out, where they're safe or when they're safe. Yeah.
Any more RAC comments? We can break this up if there's some motions. I know there's some motions that want to be made on this one, so if we want to, I'll entertain some motions.
So it's kind of a side motion for that Three Corners hunt. I want to make a motion to have the wildlife board direct the division to look into the season date structure of the Three Corners elk hunts.
Okay, Jake Huber made a motion to instruct the wildlife board, is that what we said? Instruct the wildlife board to restructure those Three Corners bull elk season dates. Did I capture that right? Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a second. Let's go ahead and vote on it. All those in favor? So there's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 4. Okay. Those against? 1 against. Passes. Okay. That leaves us with pretty much the rest of it. What any other motions on this?
I'd like to make a motion to pass the rest of the proposal as presented.
Okay, Natasha makes a motion to accept the rest of the proposal as presented. Do I have a second on it?
Can I amend it slightly? To make the eastern boundary of the private land elk hunt the Green River instead of the White River and the Colorado border. You'd have to approve the amendment. But
Yeah, could you say that again? Sorry.
so I'd make on that private land elk hunt, make it the eastern border, the Green River, rather than the White River extension. Basically, it'd follow the Green River instead of the White River and the Colorado border.
Yeah, is that because of you're anticipating the limited entry out going that way, or?
So there's to me, this private land hunt's ag. It's to help the ag producers, and there's just not a lot of ag in that there's a big swath of chunk there. There's just no ag.
Would that be the same? I guess it would match the extended archery.
Yep. It's marched the extended archery boundary on the eastern side.
Yeah, that's fine. If it matches the extended archery.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to get that. Natasha had a motion to accept as presented with amended to change the boundary of the Unibasin elk boundary or private land elk boundary to the Green River or to follow the extended archery boundary
on the east side of the
on
unit.
the east side of the unit. Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, I have a second. Let's go ahead and vote on. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's like 7, right? So are those against? 1 against? Is it 8 or 7? Yep. Okay, so the motion passes. I think I counted wrong on the first one. So that takes care of that one. We will move on to the Rusty Robinson and the once in a lifetime 2025, 2027 hunt tables and dates.
We're gonna ask that Rusty be excused tonight. He's taking his son on a hunt right now, so.
That's right. You said that earlier.
No, you're good.
apologize.
He's got his priorities straight though, so. Yeah, with that, Mr. Chair, I guess just a brief update. And if you'll notice in the packet, and if everybody remembers when the conservation permit rule came around earlier this year, there's a clause in the rule that allowed for an extension on the unit permits for bighorn sheep. And we used to ask for that extension every year. Or every 3 years, I guess, on the 3-year rotation. We decided to just fix that in rule, in the conservation permit rule, to extend those permits, the conservation permits, through the end of the year. And when we did that, and a few of the RACs, it gained traction to, hey, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if you're going to extend those, we'd ask that you extend every sheep tag that you can to the end of the year. So that motion did pass the board. And when we evaluated these season dates for once in a lifetime, especially bighorn, we extended those through the end of the year. Now, in doing that, we actually want to make it known we do have some pretty significant concerns. We start our captures in November, and we start our flights in November. Now, having a few permits out there in December isn't a big deal. November and December isn't a big deal. But having a lot of permits out there, it ends up being a bad experience for a lot of hunters. And in the past, we've had issues. That's why those dates were set where they were before. So with that information, whatever other questions you have.
Okay, is there any RAC questions on this one?
I have one. So is the main conflict just the overlap with the capture time window?
It's both capture and survey flights. So in order to get the data to make the recommendations, we've got to fly deserts in November. And that's why we end desert hunts November 10th traditionally. Now, there's always some weird exceptions in a few units here and there, but overall, we end those typically on November 10th, and then the Rockies on November 30th. But yeah, it is. It's because somebody waits till later in their hunt. And the truth is, bighorn get harder to hunt the longer you wait. So if I don't want to set this expectation of this hunt in later November and December is going to be easy, because it's not. They're a lot harder to hunt then.
On which flights do you see the most, like, I guess, conflict as far as scaring or causing problems? Is it just I mean, of course, the capture, but when you're flying for counts, do you spook them as bad? Is it like, I just more curiosity, I guess.
Yeah. So sure, I guess a capture would be more invasive temporarily than a flight. But when you're flying, like, you'll come into a canyon and then you've got to classify those animals too. So you'll slow down or stop and hover and break it out into rams, ewes, lambs, and then the class of the ram. And so if you're a hunter on the ground and you're pursuing a certain ram and a helicopter stops and hovers, or those animals start to run, and so the helicopter starts to follow and pursue, so we can get an accurate classification to then make management recommendations. I think that's when a hunter gets super, super frustrated, because you get into that terrain and it's like, well, for a sheep, from one canyon to the next is, 20 minutes. And for a human, it's rappelling gear in a couple days. And so it could be the difference of harvest or not. And we have to have those survey flights. Like, we can't not do it. So there are times where there's that conflict there, and it's just a concern.
So what was So are the conservation permit dates going to stay till the end of the year still?
Well, I can, if you want to know what the other RACs did, I can help you with that or help you.
Yeah.
So the way that this has been navigated through some of the other RACs is they've said, hey, if we're going to pull them back, let's just pull all the dates back. And then let's have the conservation permits go through what the old dates were on those units. Now there are the sportsman's tag and the statewide tag that will always go through the end of the year, you know, and one of those is drawn, one of those is, and those are both statewide tags. The sportsman's tag and the governor's tag. But for the conservation permits, they've asked the division it's a weird motion because it's like ask the board to ask the division to bring the conservation rule back out and pull those unit season dates back to be in line with what the draw hunter gets. And to be honest, like we're fine with that. If we're asked to do that, we're fine with that. And we could bring it back out this spring. That would mean, just to be completely transparent, that the conservation permits that sell this winter in 2025, they would still have the extension because they were already sold. But after that, it would go back and everything would line up.
Any other RAC questions on this one? Okay, we will move to the public questions. Any public questions? Okay, we will move to the electronic comments.
Okay, once in a lifetime, there were only 4 people weighed in on this one. 2 of them strongly agreed, 2 strongly disagreed. The comments were, one person said only allow non-residents to apply for one once in a lifetime species. And then the second comment was the concern about the spike elk hunt in the Book Cliffs and about bison being pushed out of the Little Creek unit because of too much pressure.
Okay, we'll move to the RAC comments because there are no public comments. I have no other cards up here, so we'll move to the RAC comments.
I guess it's not a big deal to me on the season overlaps. I guess I would lean to maybe giving people longer time if that was okay, but they just need to understand. And I think there's plenty of warning when they put in for the hunt that there's captures that could happen. So as long as they know that, I kind of have the same opinion on some of these overlaps too. As long as you know that, that's at least it's not a surprise, I guess.
Mountain goat tags there. It says right in there, there will be counts during the middle of it. I've yet to draw to experience that, but keep putting in every year. And maybe when I'm get 25 points, maybe then I'll draw, but I kind of have to agree with you. It's not, and I totally see where the DWR is coming from their end of, hey, give you fair warning. And so I'm okay with it as well too. I mean, they know what's happening, you know, it's, you take that chance. I like the fact that, you know, like stated, that hunt's better if you're earlier, don't wait till later. And I think that's great knowledge to share with them. But I'm okay with it, seeing if we were to pull them back or give them a little more.
Yeah, I think, can't remember the discussion complete, but it seems like there was like 10 to 12 days is what the average sheep hunt was taking. And heck, if you're at the very end, I'd just get up on a big peak and watch for the helicopter.
I got a mountain goat tag and didn't have any problems.
I would like to have the problem. Any other RAC comments on this?
I guess I would just say, I think they should match conservation permit holders, public holders, whatever it is, just match the same.
Are you making a motion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the once in a lifetime season structure and hunt dates as presented, except with having the desert bighorn sheep season dates match public hunter and conservation hunter. I don't know, does that
Okay.
work?
Richard Mueller makes a motion to accept the once in a lifetime hunt tables and dates as presented with the desert bighorn sheep hunt to coincide with the sheep hunts to dates to coincide with the public hunter tag. Did I get that right? Okay. Hey, do I have a second on it?
I'll second that.
I got a second on that. Dwayne did.
Just to be clear, that is the current recommendation. They do match right now.
They
Just
do match right
just to
now?
be clear.
Okay. So then it's pretty much accept as presented then. Okay. Would you have a set, does that change? We still have the second. All those in favor, raise your hand, vote on it. Okay. Passes unanimously. Oh, now we get to move on to Lindy with R657-62 amendments. I tried to rush us through it, Lindy, and get you done quicker, but
No, you're good. Sorry for the coat. I am freezing. So just putting that out there. So, all right. Do you want a summary or do you just want to go straight into the questions?
yeah, does anybody need a summary on this or go right to the questions? I say we just go to the questions on it.
Okay, shoot.
Hey, isn't giving the youth a point right off the bat, isn't that just gonna compound the issue even more?
Yes.
I don't see how that gains them anything. The first ones, it might, but after that,
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. It will help the first time youth to draw a point, like to draw a tag quicker, but it's also going to compound and raise the bar. So moving forward, it's just going to take more points to draw out for a certain unit because you're adding more points to that level of, of 1 point. So yeah, it will.
so is it really gaining anything to do it? Other than the first year you
Yeah,
do it?
only for the first time youth applicants, yes.
Well, but still, wouldn't it only work for the first time? Like this year, we do it this year and then next year,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, you're just adding a new level. Yeah. No, you're thinking correctly. The Mule Deer Committee was just trying to think of ways without guaranteeing a permit to the youth because we don't have enough permits to guarantee first-time youth applicants without affecting more people. But they felt like this would give them a little bit of a leg up as they go into the draws the first time. But it will raise the bar on every other level of points for all of the youth.
I think it originally started out as trying to give a youth a tag, guaranteed a tag every
Mhm.
year their first year. And
Yeah.
then it kind of ended up as this. And
There was many ideas thrown out there, because that was a main goal for the Mule Deer Committee. It's like, how do we get the youth more involved, in deer hunting? And after showing them all the numbers of, how many there are out there versus permits, this was the compromise that they all came up with.
On that youth, I guess issue, how many youth get a tag each year?
20%,
But
or
like a number, like is it
I can pull it up real quick.
is it going down? Is it going up in terms of?
It depends on how many youth apply. And so because, we guarantee 20% allocation to our youth for each unit.
I guess maybe the question is more, is there more, is the demand for youth to get tags going up or is it going, or do we have more?
No,
less?
it stays between like 17 to 20,000 youth a year. It kind of fluctuates. if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm pulling up, I can tell you like the success rate. I said I didn't pull up that graph real quick, sorry. But yeah, it fluctuates each year, but it's between 17 and 20 over the last, couple of years. And
In terms of percentage, does that end up being over the 20% allocation?
Oh,
It's quite a
yes.
bit over.
a lot over, yeah. So it's about 56% of our youth were successful. But yeah, we do have definitely a lot more youth applying, and especially like for certain units. And that's the reason why we couldn't guarantee that tag, because we had, more youth applying for the unit than permits offered. And so like, how do you do that? And so that's where this recommendation came from.
On that dedicated hunter, where you can't now, proposing not to be able to buy a point for both, how many people, and I know it says 88%, is that, did I hear 10,000?
It's around 11,000 people that dedicated hunters that do both. So total there's like this year there was 12,500 total dedicated hunter applicants. And out of that, about around 11,000 of them did both general season and dedicated hunter.
Is there any metric that determines how much point creep that's causing in terms of
No.
for the general season units, I assume?
Yeah, I haven't done like that deep of analysis on it, but overall it's like 3% of our general season applicants. So it's a small percentage of the overall, because we had 150,000 applicants for general season tags. So really like 11, like I said, it's like 3%-ish. So it's not a huge number, but again, the Mule Deer community is just trying to find little ways to help with point creep, trying to get some of these points out of the pool where they can't accumulate more than one.
With, you kind of, I think you answered this one of the other racks, but why can't we just combine the dedicated hunter tag into the general draw option?
Yeah.
I know it's the point, something to do with the points.
There's several factors to reason why we didn't decide to go that route. Time. It is a complex system. As much as you think it's simple, it actually really is a complex draw. So we wouldn't even been able to do it for the 2025 season. It would take a year or two to get through and get all the nuts and bolts figured out. Mainly because like combining points, like people have points in both dedicated hunter and general season, where if we did combine them, it would put people way above the max point allowable for general season. And not just a few, like it was a good number. Like it was kind of like, that would make a huge difference. So people would jump above into 20, 30 points.
Couldn't you just match them to whatever their highest one is?
And that's what that was the thing. It's like we'd have to figure through all that. That's why we couldn't do it simple.
Is that something you're looking into for future?
It is.
Or is it?
Yeah, we are looking into the future. We have a committee that's kind of looking at all these different things, like an internal committee looking at all different things about the draw. And this is one thing that's on the list to look into.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to make this move, you might as well just make that
Yeah.
its own hunt option.
Yeah.
In the general.
No, totally agree. And
And personally, I wish we would have just did away with general season altogether and limited entry and general. It was all one draw for deer. If you want to hunt deer, you got to put in for one. But
and that's something that we're actually looking at this. And that was kind of through the Mule Deer committee. We had a huge night just dedicated to the draw system. It was an emergency meeting that was called. You're shaking your head like, oh yeah, I remember that. Because the Mule Deer committee felt really strongly like we should really dive in and figure something out. And so we did, make the promise to the Mule Deer committee that we will dive in, because it's not just deer that would affect.
Yeah.
When you change something,
elk and
it's a
antelope
domino
too.
effect. And like, how's that going to affect elk and pronghorn draws? Because, our number one combo of applicants is general season deer, limited entry elk, and then a once in a lifetime species. And so like it's bigger than just deer. And that's why we told the Mule Deer committee, we'll look into this, give us some time. And we've already, got this committee internal, and we're looking at all the data, the sideboards, because, we're taking it very serious.
Any other RAC questions?
I feel like I understood the leftover youth permits. Could you just explain that in your own words one more time?
Yeah. So, right, like I said, mentioned before, we have a 20% allocation that we give to the youth for general season. Divided up into the 60-20-20, which is the typical split between any legal weapon, archery, and muzzleloader. So we run the youth draw with all the youth that apply. And there are times where we do have leftover archery and muzzleloader tags because we don't have enough youth applicants for a certain unit and certain weapon type. So what the Mule Deer Committee, after looking at all these numbers, like I said, they were really prone on trying to get youth out there more. So what we came up with is those leftover archery or muzzleloader tags that through that 20%, we would convert them to an any legal weapon tag because we have tons of those applications for youth. Reconvert them to an any legal weapon based on unit type. So it would stay north slope. It would stay by unit, and then rerun the youth draw again and see all those youth that were unsuccessful that had that as an any legal weapon application, see if they would be successful again. And then if they were again unsuccessful, then they'd go into the regular draw. So it's kind of like a third round for our youth to try to get a DARE permit.
How many units or how many of those hunts are there that aren't selling out the use?
You want units or permits?
Units.
Oh, it was like a lot of them. Let's see here. So for archery, there's 26 units. The early any legal weapon, there was 1 unit. There was like 10 permits. It was crazy when I saw that. And then the muzzleloader, there was 23 units.
Isn't the early, in that fall under the same as they can hunt all the
Mhm.
units anyways?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is odd.
Yeah, like I said, that, and it's going to vary. This is like these numbers that I showed in my presentation was for 2024. So they could vary. So next, year, there may not be any legal weapon. It just is based on applications. But we do see it in the archery muzzleloader for sure.
That sparked another question. So the remaining, there's usually been some leftover. I don't know if they're necessarily leftover, but the archery permits, like after the draw, is that still, I can't remember if that was addressed. Is that still going to be available?
Yeah, those
for the youth?
the 20% of the 20%. Is that what you're talking about, or the leftover permits from the draw?
I thought there was like another block, but maybe they've always just been leftover permits.
So so there's leftover permits from the draw. They like this year we had Wasatch West, a handful of those, or Chaw Creek, but we also offer the youth 20% archery, like 20% of the 20% archery permits, and those don't go through the draw. That's an additional archery permits that we give to them.
And they are part of that 20% then?
No, they're 20, we give them, so the archery, we do 60-20-20.
Mhm.
So we take 20% of that 20%. So it's a smaller number. So if it's 20%, we give them, 100 tags. We're giving them 20 tags over the counter for archery.
Okay.
And those are above and beyond. Those aren't approved through the draw.
Okay, thanks.
So there's tons of opportunity out there for the youth because a lot of those units do not sell out.
So you're not taking tags from somewhere else. You're adding, this is just above. These are just
those archery ones.
20%. Yeah, they're just 20%. Just if there's any youth that didn't get a tag for anything, they can pick these up.
Yep.
And
They
those
can
don't
just
take
go buy
their
those and
points
they
either,
actually
do
don't
they?
lose their points either if
Yeah.
they buy those ones. So,
And those aren't being converted into.
nope, those are not being touched at all.
Okay.
I guess that was my question. Those ones that are left over that you can buy, I guess, but over the counter, I guess you'd call it. How many of those are being used? I mean, is there some of them left over, after the hunt starts and when it's over, the youth tags that are allocated to youth that maybe aren't drawn for? Because if they're not drawn, like if there's leftover archery youth tags, they go on sale, correct? Is that where?
No, so the ones that are left over through the 20% allocation, those are typically like right now, in the draw, they would go into the regular round where all of us could draw out for. And so they are utilized. So they're just, the Mule Deer Committee just want to take those permits and actually just try to get them to the youth hands before they went to the adult hands. It's the most complicated process ever. My contractor loves me.
So was there talk of just combining the youth, like they have the like the out tags and allowing them to
They
hunt
did.
all the weapons?
They did talk about just making it an illegal weapon tag. But again, we have like, rounding 17 to 20,000 youth each year, depending on the year. The draws would drastically increase because there wouldn't be enough. There was harvest concern because, the harvest rate would probably go up. And the Mule Deer Committee didn't want to get rid of the draw odds for those of youth that decided to use an archery or muzzleloader because it's really simple to draw those tags.
Yeah, that
Like,
would take away opportunity
it
for
would-
kids that are wanting to,
Mhm.
to guarantee they draw. So
Yeah, like I said this last night, like I've never put my kid in for any illegal weapon tag. Like even though with that 3 season, I hunt with we have rifles, but I want my kid out there. So I've always applied for a muzzleloader tag so he could draw, because, and teaching him that you don't have to have a rifle to be out there. There's other methods, there's other things. And he drew his first year, so there's means out there, but I get it. But there was that talk a lot.
One other question with that, and maybe you can remind me because I haven't put in obviously this year, but how many choices is there for youth to pick
They
in the
can-
draw system?
5.
5?
Yep,
Okay.
just like you and I, they can pick up to 5 different
So they could pick their
choices.
multi-season and still have their 4th or 5th archery or muzzleloader and still have that
Mhm.
opportunity.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other RAC questions? Okay, we'll move on to the public questions.
Daniel Davis, again. For those youth permits, if they do get redrawn under those rifle permits that get converted, will they become eligible now to hunt all 3 seasons?
Yes, because they're now a rifle tag. Yeah, they're any illegal weapon, so they'd hunt all 3.
Thank you.
Tyrell, hey, Bigman. Lindy, I got a few questions for you. I mean, first, would it help the draw odds if we went back to 14 years old for the youth? Would it help them be a little bit more successful? Because I know of a few of them that went all the way through their 6, 7 years and never even drew it.
It could, yeah, because you're eliminating those 11 and 12-year-olds. So yeah, you're just removing applications, so.
Okay, and secondly, it seems here the last 6, 7 years, we've had a lot of hatred coming towards the dedicated hunters. Any idea why that is?
I don't think it's hatred. I've never portrayed that.
I mean, it's.
But I do get what you're saying. Like we've asked, like we've changed, the fee. We've done several hours. Like I get where you're coming from, but it's not hatred. But there's some tweaks to the rules that have happened over the last several years.
And it seems like about every other year we have something that's trying to pull a little bit more. And I mean, in my opinion, after we finally draw out, and some of the years we're not able to do the projects because either there ain't any or got a pandemic or something, we're paying more for the 2 deer that we get than what an Antelope Island's buffalo tag is. Our highest paid, and then we're paying more than that, and it seems like we're getting a lot more blowback, I guess you could say. What would be the difference in combining them and making people choose between limited entry and general season? Because to me, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from. Again, when we were talking through the Mule Deer Committee, they were just looking at ways like trying to get more opportunity, ways to get people to be able to draw a permit. And this way they saw like it could eliminate, 11,000 points in the system. Had nothing to do towards dedicated hunters. We've been tasked, but I do see, like I said, we did have this huge meeting on, the point system it's a lot more complex than just combining limited entry and general season. But we are looking into it and looking at all different angles because we want to make sure that we're doing that's right for the public and for the division and for the wildlife.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like it would pull a lot more points off doing this, and I think it'd pull more points off if you made them choose between limited entry and just the general season too.
Yeah, again, like I said, we're looking into it, so.
Any other public comments? Okay, we'll move on to the electronic comments.
7 people weighed in on this agenda item. Looks like 1 person strongly agreed, 3 somewhat agreed, 1 somewhat disagreed, and 2 strongly disagreed. 7 total votes. The weighted average was 3. So the 4 specific comments that were left, it said the 2,000 plus tags that remain from the youth drawing should not be reallocated. Next comment is supportive of changes bringing more opportunity to youth hunters. Propose that limited entry tags that are turned back go to an alternative pool of youth hunters. And then 2 people said that youth should draw every year.
Okay, we'll move to the public comments. We have 1 on this one, Tyrell. Okay, all right. Appreciate it to coming, Tyrell. We'll move to the RAC comments. I can comment on the dedicated hunter general season 1. That was actually brought up by a guy who he says, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot because I take advantage of this and does the points that way. But he looked at it solely as opportunity to put tags back into the draw by not having people essentially double dipping. And that's how he looked at it, was essentially that we could put points back in there and get more tags in other people's hands by people who with dedicated hunter, when they draw that, not being able to get a point every year during that. And that was the whole sole purpose why I put it up there. It wasn't to get rid of dedicated hunter for that. It was just strictly for more opportunities, really what it come down to. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to talk for a minute about the youth, and I'm grateful for what the suggestions that have been given. I think as an individual, it's not, when I think of my youth, I have youth at home that hunt, one that's 18 now, some that are coming up and just starting to hunt. And the way I see it, it's not the division's responsibility to make sure my kid has a tag. We have a mentor opportunity in Utah, and it's a great opportunity. If I wanted my kid to have a tag when they turned 12, I made sure that I had enough points that I drew. So if they didn't, I can mentor them with that tag. So I like what the division is trying to do for the youth, but I think we as parents and as sportsmen, not only have I mentored my kids, but also other people have. And my kids have had tons of opportunity to hunt, not only deer, but also limited entry and elk. So I like what they're trying to do. I really like the reallocation of the tags. The ones that maybe aren't drawn between muzzleloader and archery, but I'm not real fond of giving that first year hunter a point to try to guarantee that they draw a tag. That should be on us as parents and sportsmen, not the division.
I agree with that. I just don't see how it helps anything other than 1 year. Just this year, it's going to help the 12-year-olds that come in. And then after that, everyone's on the same footing again.
Any other comments? Whoa. Go ahead.
I think Nate made a great point I haven't been thinking about, but that mentor program has been awesome. That's a great point. Like there are definitely other ways, and definitely commend the DWR and looking out and the committees that have been trying to get youth involved. I've been kind of thinking about that too. It's kind of goes back to some of the other things we talked about earlier is, it's okay for them to do hard things too. And just hunting in general is going to be hard, but that's part of the process, and just going back to the education and learning the system. And yeah, if you really want it, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to find that opportunity.
Okay, I will entertain a motion on it.
Make a motion to accept the proposal as presented by the Division of Wildlife.
Okay, I have a motion by Natasha to accept the R657-62 amendments, general season dedicated arm application youth allocations as presented. Do I have a second on it?
I'd second it.
Have a second? Okay, let's have a vote on it. All those who are in favor, raise your hand. Okay, 6. Those that oppose? There's 2 that oppose. So would you guys like to comment on why you oppose, or?
Just that extra point for the 12-year-olds. It's not needed. Other than that, everything else is fine.
I agree. Same thing. I just opposed to the extra point for the first year applications.
Okay, that passes. We will move on to everyone's favorite person, Chad, because he's the last one always. Did everybody get a chance to look at the CWMU presentation and that, and they need Chad to summarize anything?
You mind doing just your quickest summary?
Yeah, so it's mostly renewals, 24 renewal applications, 1 renewal that we're recommending denial, 1 new application, and then 2 change applications, and then 1 LOA renewal.
Okay, any RAC questions on it?
Was your denial, was it discussed at any of the other RACs?
Yeah, it was discussed pretty heavy last night. That's the region that it was in. So yeah, we discussed
That's the one meeting I wasn't able to watch, so.
I believe the gentleman was there too. He was presented on himself there as well.
Yeah, the gentleman that now owns that ranch showed up, and you guys probably all saw his comment. He pretty much read that, and then the RAC there asked him some questions too. So
how did they end up voting on that?
They ended up recommending that he gets approved. I think it was 5-4. It was a pretty close vote, but they recommended approval for JB.
When you have can't even think of the word, probationary period have you ever had that on other CWMUs where there's like, they go through a probationary period to see how they operate, that type of deal? I mean, I'm just more curious. I don't know.
Yeah, usually a probation comes after you've been in the program and during the COR that there's maybe something that's been questionably done. So I don't know that we've ever started a CWMU on a renewal or at the beginning on probation to begin with.
And this violation that he had was like 18 years ago, 20 years ago, something
Yeah,
like
I think
that.
last night they said 2006. So yeah, 18 years ago.
And when you strictly on the denial of it, was it off of, because I know you mentioned that the first meeting you had was not a good first meeting. Was it more based off strictly off that? Or was it just off of the fact that he had that 1 wildlife violation?
No, it was a combination. I mean, the wildlife violation was long enough ago that we don't believe like any of it should be a death sentence, that you should never be able to do it again. So we wanted to chat with him and see where his mind was at. And when we did, it was just seemed like there was enough conflict to give us a reservation of not knowing him very well. We had a pretty tight window that we had to make a decision in. So just in that tight window and just not feeling comfortable, we thought we'd be more comfortable if we were able to spend more time with him and see if he would manage more towards a Utah style than other places that he's managed from.
Now, when you give him remind me, when you give him the approval, how many years is it? Are they locked into the CWMU?
It's a 3-year COR.
3 year. That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, there are some measures there that CORs can be revoked during that 3 years, but so there is potential. It's probably a little bit more of a difficult process sometimes.
How does it work if a ranch is sold in between those 3-year periods? So I guess if he would have bought it next year, would he have just been like grandfathered in, or how does it
No,
work?
at that point, we would have probably, we'd look at that same thing, right? New landowner, we'd do a little bit of research on them. And if we found the wildlife conviction, we'd have those same discussions and have those same talks with them. So yeah, like we'll do the research either way. So yeah, if it's not up for renewal, that's not gonna make it so you can slide through.
Has this been a pretty successful CWMU historically?
Oh yeah, yes, it's been an outstanding CWMU. Last year they were CWMU of the year. That was an award that the division has started giving to CWMUs, is only our second year giving it, and they got it the second year. So it's one that has traditionally worked very well with the division. They've done an outstanding job.
But a lot of that comes from the operators. So
Yeah,
how
yeah,
that's
operators can make a huge difference in it. Yep.
So if I understand it right, there is a change in operator. It's not the same operators that won the
It's-
award.
It's not
new.
not technically yet. So this was a little bit tricky because they knew of a pending sale in like June or July, but for it to go through, it wasn't going to be till the end of September. So to put in their application, they had to put in the application with the old ownership. And then we told them that once it sold, then we'd do a change application. So part of that change application, it's for next year because it's part of the renewal. So with the renewal, that's when, right now it'd be, Robert would be the president and the operator of that CWMU. But currently it's still listed as the ones that were currently running it, even though he is the landowner there now. And I think he has been involved with some of the hunting operations. But that is a hard one, going back kind of to your question, is if it's in the middle of a hunting season and it happens, like, it's probably not right for us to shut down a hunt in the middle of it with people with tags. So we kind of have to ride out this year on that.
How long's he been employed or working for that ranch? Because he said he'd been there for a while. Because I remember the current operator was talking about how he was really good with the clients and whatnot.
He bought it like end of September, beginning of October. So he's owned it for a month and a half.
But has he worked there longer? Was he there for a
He
longer
might have
period?
had some contact there, but that would probably be more of a question for them. I'm not sure when he started to do anything on the ranch, but as far as I know, it was after he bought it. I guess it's safe to say that that's when he for sure started, maybe a little bit before.
So has his attitudes changed quite a bit since you guys denied his?
Yeah, yeah, and part of that too is like, it was a meeting. It was a hour and a half, maybe 2-hour meeting that we talked to him, and there's a filling out stage. So maybe we weren't seeing things eye to eye, but yeah, further conversations with him have been more positive, for sure. A lot more of like, I'm willing to do what the division wants me to do and follow all the laws of the state. So yeah, I've seen a change and a progress in our relationship already in that month and a half.
Any other RAC questions? Okay, any public questions?
Daniel Davis. So you stated that the division has the authority to revoke a COR in that 3-year period. And that includes up to what? Wildlife infractions, ethical issues? What would that include?
Yeah, and I might ask Kyle, our lawyers online now. So I don't know if the division has that or if the board has it. Has
And
that
when we say
authority.
board, we're talking the
Wild-
CWMU board.
The wildlife board.
Wildlife board.
The wildlife board, yes. CWMU advisory committee can make recommendations to the wildlife board. They can put a CWMU on probation, but to yank that COR, I think that's something the wildlife board would have to do. Kyle, you have anything to say on that one?
No, that's right. So if there's a violation of the terms of the COR, any other rule or Title 23A, the Wildlife Board could revoke or place a CWMU on probation. And to clarify what the rule specifies probation is it basically puts a CWMU on a corrective action plan with the advisory committee and requires them to report to the advisory committee. So unfortunately, when we went through the rule, we didn't see any latitude to change the term of the COR away from 3 years.
So a wildlife game violation is not an automatic denial or revoke of COR
I think,
within the operation, essentially.
yeah, I think once we have a conviction, if we have a wildlife conviction at that point, and it's, one that's just happened, I don't know that it's an automatic one, but it's one that would take to the wildlife board, and I would feel pretty confident that at that point, they would make the ultimate decision. So I guess I'm not going to say what they're going to decide. But
Even if it is just baiting, right?
Yeah, and I can clarify a little bit is we would have to have a hearing and there would be some decision to be made by the wildlife board. It wouldn't just automatically jump into place.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Daniel's about the only one there. All right, we will move to the electronic comment section.
Hey, 6 people weighed in on this agenda item. 1 strongly agreed, 1 somewhat agreed. 1 was neutral and 3 strongly disagreed. 6 total votes for a weighted average of 2.5. 2 comments, do not allow Junction Valley 2 extra bull permits due to the lack of harvest and lack of hunter satisfaction. And then the second one was comment, or a fairly lengthy comment from Robert Eckenauer, the owner of JB Ranch. And I think you all probably saw that, and pretty similar to, I think he sent a letter around as well. So I think this comment was the same as the letter. So anyhow, that's it.
Okay, we don't have any public comment cards, so we will move to the RAC comments. And this was the JB Ranch, if anybody is going to make a motion on it, just so you are aware if that's what you're pushing.
With the success of that ranch in the past, I hate not including it in for the 3-year period, another 3 years. Or would it be 3 years, or would they be able to apply again next year?
they'd be able to apply next year.
Okay. Oh, maybe he just needs to set out a year to, but at the same time, I'd hate to see it go away too.
I kind of think if he's working with the division, that's why he'll show that he's willing to make the change. I don't know. When I first read it, I kind of thought his wildlife violation was sooner. I didn't realize that it was 20 years before. And then I heard him speak last night on his stance on things, and it kind of maybe swayed me a little bit more. But I'm kind of with Jake. Great CWMU, it sounds like, and I kind of hate to see it as well not have a opportunity. But any other RAC comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion then. I feel like we're kind of feeling like we can give some grace tonight, but to approve the recommendations with the one exception of the JB Ranch denial, and to approve them in so much as they follow follow all the requirements.
Okay, do we have a motion by Eric to accept the CWMU renewals and CWMU public land, and including the LOAs, right? It's on there as well too, as presented, and with the exception of the JB Ranch to allow them to be a CWMU as long as they follow the CWMU rules. They capture that? Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Jake seconds. All those, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. 7. Any opposed? 1 opposed. So the motion passes. That's the end of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, motion to adjourn. Those that second it and vote on it. Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming. All you public people here left.